A grand culinary crest is displayed.
In a professional kitchen, the chef begins her intricate culinary work. The chef carefully prepares a vibrant stew with fresh sliced vegetables.
She expresses her deep personal joy in both creating and tasting food.
The chef takes a mindful taste to ensure the flavors are balanced.
Satisfied diners enjoy a variety of gourmet dishes in the restaurant.
A sense of pride and joy fills the chef as she watches people eat.
High-quality ingredients continue to fuel her passion for making meals. Her culinary inspiration seems to transcend the boundaries of her world.
A dark-haired man in noble attire finds comfort in a simple meal.
She prepares a large seafood platter even for those who might oppose her.
The silver-haired warrior blushes as he finds the food unexpectedly delicious.
Hearty meals simmer over the bright flames of a stone hearth.
New guests receive a jovial welcome as they enter the rustic tavern. To the server, every hungry person is considered equal at the table. A cheerful blonde girl proudly serves a steaming bowl of golden soup. Night falls over a quiet, modern building. Yui confesses that something strange has been happening lately in her apartment.
Mizuki questions the nature of these weird events while they eat together. Yui explains that the arrangement of her belongings shifts slightly every day. She notes that items like the remote and her desk chair keep moving.
Mizuki wonders if living alone is causing Yui to notice strange things.
Mizuki jokingly suggests that the apartment might be a haunted house with ghosts.
Yui dismisses the idea of a curse despite her friend's playful teasing. The two friends try to laugh off the frightening ghost theories. A sudden, loud clatter sounding from the hallway cuts their laughter short, and heavy, oppressive silence hangs in the air after the unexplained noise. Terrified by the sound, the two friends cling to one another in fear. Despite her fear, Yui decides they must investigate the source of the noise.
The friends cautiously approach the door leading to the dark room.
A trembling hand reaches out to open it. A slow, sharp creak sounds as the door slides open.
They peer into the darkness with wide eyes and bated breath. To their immense relief, the closet contains only a few pairs of shoes. They share a shaky laugh, relieved that no intruder was found.
Mizuki teases Yui about being a lightweight who likely drank too much. Mizuki admits she's suddenly hungry from all the nervous, panicked excitement. A suspicious rattle echoes from the door they just closed.
Mizuki bids Yui a final goodnight and departs for the evening.
Left alone, Yui wonders if her imagination is indeed playing tricks. She sighs at the mess left behind on the table.
Yui decides to clean up before finally heading to bed.
Her foot suddenly slips, sending her tumbling toward the floor. A large, gloved hand suddenly reaches out. The dark-haired man from the tavern catches Yui before she hits the floor. Stunned, Yui gazes up at the mysterious stranger who appeared from nowhere. She is struck by his exotic appearance and his striking golden eyes.
Dazed, Yui asks the stranger if he is actually a fairy.
The man looks down at her with an intense and concerned expression.
Still blushing, Yui thanks the man for his timely intervention.
He looks around the room for a resting place.
He spots a nearby strikes cops.
He gently places her on the cushions. She recalls thanking her mysterious savior. Groaning, she wakes with a painful headache. She wonders if the handsome man was real. She decides he was only a dream. She shifts her weight on the couch. A sudden presence nearby stops her pulse. The dark-haired stranger stands right before her. She leaps back in pure, unadulterated shock.
She panics about how he entered her home.
Recognition dawns as she studies his haze.
Seeing his bare feet confirms he's real.
She identifies him as the Dream's Fairy. Reality hits her with sudden, jarring force.
She stares, frozen in wide-eyed disbelief. She remembers him from the previous night. She demands to know his entry point.
She regrets her drunken words and behavior. The sight of a sword terrifies her.
She notices even more weapons on him. She wonders if he's been watching her. She reaches for her phone to call the police, but she lets out a sharp eek when he suddenly tries to speak to her.
She shouts for him to stay away, but his stomach suddenly lets out a loud, rumbling growl that makes him blush in shame. Confusion replaces her initial wave of fear. She is stunned by the stomach's mansity. His deep embarrassment makes him look pitiful. She decides he isn't a bad person. She offers to cook a quick meal. A promise of food calms the situation. He sits patiently at her dining table. She considers light breakfast option for him. Her own nausea makes cooking a challenge. She searches the fridge for available ingredients. Egg porridge is the perfect remedy. She prepares to start her culinary work. Fresh vegetables and rice and pattered. She rinses the rice directly in the pot. She chops the carrots and starts stir-frying. The meal simmers over the stove flame. Adding an egg finishes the delicate dish. She seasons the porridge with a pinch of salt. She decides to let it simmer longer. She steals a quick glance at him. She admits she knows nothing about him. While she cooks, she asks the man to explain who he is and how he managed to get into her apartment.
The man explains that he is not actually a resident of her world.
He introduces himself as Nemo, an agent serving the group known as the Forest of the Sun. His bizarre and unexpected introduction leaves her completely bewildered and asking him to repeat what he just said.
Nemo claims he entered this world through the shoe cabinet, leaving Yui deeply skeptical. As the food simmers, Nemo explains his organization's devotion to the world's glory. Yui feels completely bewildered by his bizarre explanation.
Yui finds him odd while Nemo wonders how she understands his language.
Nemo credits a temporary divine blessing for his ability to speak her language. Nemo reveals he came seeking her cooperation for a specific task.
A loud, hungry grrr sounding from Nemo's stomach interrupts his serious explanation.
Yui decides they must eat before continuing their conversation. She plans to garnish the dish with seaweed and sesame seeds. Yui serves the hot rice porridge and encourages him to enjoy it. Nemo stares at the simple breakfast with intense concentration. Yui tells him not to hold back and to start eating.
After a large bite, a sudden loud clatter sounds as Nemo jumps back.
Nemo gasps that the food is extremely hot, causing Yui to offer mutter. Nemo begins chewing the warm porridge with a satisfied munch. He continues to eat the meal with visible, quiet enjoyment. Sparkles surround Nemo as he finds the simple meal truly delicious. Yui watches him eat with a curious and thoughtful expression. Yui admits that seeing him enjoy the food makes her happy. The meal is finished, leaving only an empty bowl. Nemo expresses his sincere thanks for the delicious meal. A quick kata sounding from the table punctuates his promise of gratitude.
Yui brushes off his thanks, glad he liked the prukan.
Nemo prepares to resume their discussion about his dying world.
Nemo identifies as a servant of the sun and begs for her world-saving power. Yui maintains a polite but entirely skeptical smile. Yui ignores his plea and asks if the porridge was tasty. Nemo confirms it was delicious but is confused by her sudden question. Yui gives him a very gentle, practiced smile.
A sudden whoosh sounding accompanies her polite command for him to leave.
Yui repeats her firm request for Nemo to depart immediately. Nemo is caught completely off guard by her sudden rejection. Nemo warns of a world perishing, but Yui dismisses him and demands he leave. A sharp grab sounding occurs as Nemo stops Yui from pushing him away. Nemo begs for trust while Yui insists he just leave her home. Unseen voices plead for help, stressing how much they need her. Nemo looks at her with a pained, desperate, and flushed expression. Yui huffs an annoyed ugh and firmly refuses to help.
She wonders what use his handsome face is in this situation.
Yui pushes him out, certain that involvement will only bring disaster. A sudden, loud bang sounds as the front door slams shut.
Yui shouts for him to bother someone else through the door.
A sharp creak sounding follows as she checks the hallway through the peephole.
Through the peephole, she sees Nemo standing outside looking dejected. Yui turns away from the door, feeling the weight of the silence. Yui huffs in frustration, wishing he had left when first told. She looks back at the entrance with a conflicted expression. A soft sliding sounding occurs as she approaches the door once more. Yui wonders why the hallway has suddenly become so quiet. She suspects Nemo is still standing silently right outside of door. Yui tells herself to stay focused and stop worrying about a lunatic. She is determined not to open the door or get involved any further. A row of clean white dishes sits neatly on a drying rack. She looks back at the entrance with a troubled and hesitant expression. She wonders if he is truly still standing outside in the hallway. 5 hours have passed and she begins to feel a wave of guilt. A sudden quick pattering sounding occurs as she rushes towards the front door. Her hand grips the lever, thinking she will check on him just once. A sharp clack sounding follows as she opens the door and spots Nemo.
Nemo is sitting on the ground outside, looking dejected and shivering.
A soft whoosh sounding accompanies the cold winter air blowing into the apartment. She is shocked that he actually stayed outside in the freezing cold. Nemo looks like a pitiful, shivering puppy in the middle of winter. Overcome with worry, she tells him to just come inside already. Rhythmic, heavy thudding sounding follows as she leads him into the living room. A light clink sounding occurs as she sets a steaming mug before him. Nemo explains he stayed because she told him to leave, while Yui asks why he didn't just return to his world. Nemo looks down at the floor with a sad and mysterious expression. She notices his gaze and wonders what he is looking at so intently.
His eyes are fixed on the large white and brown shoe cabinet.
Yui recalls his arrival and wonders if his wild claims are actually true. She encourages him to drink something warm to help heat up his body. Golden, thick honey drips slowly from a wooden dipper. She explains it is just warm milk with honey to help with the cold. A soft slurp sounding follows as Nemo takes a tentative sip. A warm, glowing sensation surrounds him as he enjoys the comforting drink. Yui notes his love for food but insists his problems aren't hers. Yui tells him to leave after finishing, but Nemo begs her to reconsider. She explains she has her own life and cannot make whim-based decisions. Yui tells him to find someone else, but Nemo claims that is impossible. Nemo explains that as an outsider, he can only communicate with the first person he met here. Nemo's words turn into an unintelligible language, leaving her confused as he realizes his spell failed.
A sudden loud thud accompanies Nemo as he stands up from the couch. Heavy, deliberate thudding sounding follows as Nemo walks toward the entrance.
A sharp clatter sounding occurs as he reaches out and opens the cabinet.
A light whoosh sounding follows as he steps toward the dark interior. Yui rushes forward, shouting for him to wait as he begins to disappear. She stares at the closed cabinet door in a stunned, breathless silence. She hesitantly asks if he is still there behind the door. A soft creak sounding follows as she opens it to find it empty. She is struck by a wave of pure, wide-eyed disbelief. Sparkling light surrounds the cabinet as she processes what just happened. She realizes with shock that her shoe cabinet is a portal to another world. She peers into the vacant cabinet, searching for any sign of him. A light tap sounding occurs as she touches the empty wooden shelf. A sudden soft slide sounding accompanies Nemo's reappearance right behind her.
She lets out a sharp gasp as she spins around to see him.
The two return to the kitchen table to continue their bizarre conversation.
Nemo apologizes for the scare and explains his translation spell wore off, requiring a 3-day recast.
Yui studies his face, finding his explanation of magic spells completely overwhelming. Yui notes his lip movements don't match his words at all.
A soft, thoughtful sounding comes from Mino.
Yui questions why she should save a world she doesn't know. Nemo explains he received a direct order to stay with her. The prophets commanded Nemo to assist her until she agrees to help. A noble aura surrounds Nemo as he accepts his duty. Nemo promises to obey her every command while she looks on bewildered. Yui is horrified by his bizarre and suspicious service offer. While Nemo vows to earn her trust, Yui feels emotionally pressured. Nemo begs her once more while she looks on with hesitation. Yui realizes she cannot kick him out without feeling guilty again. Yui suffers a silent scream over her own stubborn conscience. A heavy clunk sounding occurs as she agrees he can stay. Yui remains firm despite letting him stay inside. Morning birds chirp outside under a clear sky. Bloodshot, tired eyes reveal her lack of sleep.
Yui is exhausted after worrying about him all through the night.
A soft rustling sound follows as she finally gets out of bed. Rhythmic, soft thudding sounding accompanies her walk to the kitchen. She finds Nemo already awake and eating in the living room. Yui wonders what he could possibly be eating so early. Yui is shocked to learn he is eating a gray gel.
She pokes the hard, clay-like substance with complete disbelief.
Nemo offers her a taste of the strange, unappetizing food. She hopes it tastes better than it looks before taking a bite. A sudden, sharp crunching sounding follows her first horrific taste. Nemo explains it is the standard food of his world. Yui collapses, describing the taste as salty plaster and rocks. She realizes the dire state of his world through its food.
A sudden, loud thud sounding follows as she stands up determined.
She forbids him from eating that and promises real food. Yui marches away with the gray gel in her hand.
She searches her fridge for ingredients to make a gentle meal.
She finds everything she needs to start her prepare. The ingredients include dough, vegetables, eggs, cheese, and bread. A rhythmic tack sounding accompanies her as she chops the ingredients.
She prepares the dough in a tin and pokes air holes.
The yellow egg filling is ready to be poured in. The rich quiche filling is poured into the prepared crust. The quiche and salt bread are placed into the oven. A soft ding sounding announces the meal is finished and ready. The table is set with quiche, salad, bread, and juice. A nervous gulp sounding follows as Nemo looks at the feast.
Yui encourages him to start eating without being shy.
A soft munch sounding follows as Nemo takes his first bite. Nemo looks blissfully happy as he chews the delicious food. Yui tries to maintain her resolve despite his adorable reaction. Yui vows she will not give in to his request. A quiet moment passes between them at the table. Nemo continues to eat the warm meal with deep appreciation. Yui looks at Nemo with a troubled and thoughtful expression. She explains she added some nuts for a sweet and crunchy texture. 2 perfect scoops of ice cream sit in a glass bowl. Yui encourages Nemo to try the dessert while he watches her carefully. Nemo takes a bite immediately, and Yui notices he seems more relaxed. Yui wonders if his world only fed him rocks and chalky substances. Nemo suffers a sudden, sharp brain freeze while Yui watches in confusion. Yui asks Nemo to explain his world before she makes any decisions.
A soft top sounding occurs as Nemo agrees to answer her questions.
Nemo asks for drawing materials so he can properly illustrate his explanation. Nemo explains his world exists in a much lower and lighter dimension. Nemo shows Yui a drawing consisting of several concentric circles. Nemo points to the center as Yui compares the drawing to a target. A light tap sounding follows as Nemo points to the outer rings. Nemo explains that heavier dimensions have less belief in magic and gods. Nemo notes that while her world lacks magic, she understands the concept. Yui recalls magic from childhood fairy tales and asks if he breathed fire. Yui listens intently while Nemo acknowledges her understanding of fantasy. Nemo explains that in his dimension, strong emotions can manifest as actual flames. Nemo describes a tragic event caused by a powerful mage named Berta. Yui asks about the contract of hatred as Nemo describes the catastrophe. A barrier was erected to seal off the fallen empire's desolate land. Nemo identifies the demon Finnegar Diovirda as the heart of the catastrophe. Nemo explains the prophets see a traveler from another world as their salvation. Yui wonders aloud if she really looks like a powerful being. Yui laughs nervously while sweating under the pressure of his gaze. She asks if crossing over would grant her some kind of great power. Nemo states he is merely a servant and only follows his orders. Yui is frustrated by his vague responses and lack of concrete certainty.
Nemo explains his group serves the glory of the world, not a king.
Yui stares ahead with a blank, overwhelmed, and dazed expression.
Yui feels mentally exhausted by the talk of demons and world-ending disasters.
Nemo asks if there is truly nothing he can help her with.
Yui tells him everything is fine, though he remains visibly hesitant.
Yui tells Nemo to wait on the couch and watch some television.
Yui reflects on her hidden reasons for letting him stay in her home. A sharp crash sounding follows as Nemo accidentally breaks a ceramic dish.
Yui is disturbed by how terrified Nemo is over a single broken dish.
Yui tells herself to stop overthinking and focus on her immediate tasks. Yui decides to prepare cinnamon rusks as a snack for their movie. She gathers bread scraps, butter, sugar, and a bottle of cinnamon powder. The butter is melted in the microwave and combined with the sugar.
A soft ding sounding marks the end of the 10-minute baking cycle. Yui uses kitchen scissors to cut the baked bread into bite-sized pieces.
A plate of golden, seasoned rusks is ready for the movie man.
Yui brings the tray of snacks out to Nemo in the living room.
A soft crunch sounding follows as Nemo enjoys the sweet snack.
Yui reflects on her recent search history regarding interdimensional travel and magic. She found only fantasy novels and movies instead of real-world answers.
Yui finds watching Nemo's genuine reactions to the movies surprisingly entertaining.
Nemo's face flushes with a soft, embarrassed blush. She reflects that their current situation cannot last forever. Nemo insists on helping with chores, but she gently refuses.
Nemo diligently wipes down the table while she watches him. She views him as a machine-like person who only obeys orders. She wonders if she can truly trust a man like that.
While Nemo is away, she plans some late-night snacks on the phone.
She considers preparing the ingredients for tomorrow's meals in advance. A sudden heavy clunk sounding marks Nemo's sudden return to the room.
She is shocked to see Nemo has returned with severe injuries.
Nemo stands with a bruised face and a sword at his hip.
She begins treating the deep gashes across his bare back.
He claims it doesn't hurt, but she scolds him for lying. She wonders how he could have sustained such terrible physical abuse.
A sudden quick tap sounding occurs as her hand freezes in place.
She recalls him eating her cooking and connects it to his wounds.
She asks if he was punished for eating the food she made.
Nemo looks away silently, confirming her cooking caused his punishment. Nemo explains his law-based punishment while she expresses her deep regret.
Nemo downplays the pain, comparing it favorably to exile or death.
She is overwhelmed by his casual acceptance of such brutal treatment. She asks if everyone in his world is forced to eat shell.
Nemo confirms that servants are strictly forbidden from eating anything else.
He explains that the prophets use gel to suppress all worldly desires. She realizes the prophets strip away life's joys to ensure total obedience.
Nemo denies any ill intent as she questions his true motivations.
She asks if all music, dance, and even dreams are banned.
Nemo expresses his desire to dedicate his life to the world's glory.
She decides to ask him one final important question about himself. Nemo turns toward her with a calm and patient expression.
Nemo admits there is something in this world he truly enjoys. He stands tall, looking at her with newfound warmth in his eyes. He tells her that her cooking has become his only happiness.
She is left speechless and blushing by his sincere, heartfelt confession.
She tells him she's glad he found something to love here. He explains an obedience spell prevents him from lying to his leaders.
Chibi Nemo declares he will gladly endure more whipping for her food. She feels conflicted and guilty about the price of his happiness. She decides to end the heavy conversation and suggests getting sleep.
The night passes quietly over the silent, empty apartment windows.
A soft creak sounding follows as her bedroom door opens the next morning.
She looks exhausted after spending the entire night worrying about him.
She finds Nemo waiting in the kitchen and decides to cook breakfast. She plans a simple Japanese meal with tamagoyaki and small sausages. She suggests he watch television to pass the time while she works. A soft top sounding occurs as she reaches for the eggs. Nemo asks if she has a family, citing the prophet's strange theories.
He explains they ordered him to confirm her lack of local ties.
She mentions her grandmother passed away only a single year ago.
She recounts how her grandmother once found her abandoned by the roadside.
Yui recalls her past as a bruised orphan child being taken in by a kind woman in the pouring rain.
Nemo explains that the prophets rescued him from becoming prey in a desolate wasteland.
A rhythmic tack sounding follows Yui as she chops ingredients and questions if Nemo's upbringing was truly lucky.
Yui stares ahead with a troubled and determined expression.
While food bubbles on the stove, Yui asserts that Nemo's world is fundamentally wrong. A sharp click sounding occurs as her hand turns off the primer.
Yui reflects on the inherent cruelty of a group that uses violence to enforce its rules. Standing amidst blooming flowers, she introduces herself as Yui Kono, rejecting the title of savior.
Nemo gazes at her with a quiet and contemplative look.
Yui offers to let him stay in her world despite being unable to save his.
Nemo firmly rejects her offer, stating that staying is an impossible option for him.
Yui reaches out to him, desperate to find another way.
Nemo remains silent, his expression unreadable as he stands before her.
With a heavy sigh, Yui accepts his decision and yields.
Since neither will cross over, Yui concludes there is no longer a reason for him to stay.
She formally asks him to return to his original world.
Nemo reacts with a mix of surprise and silent resignation to her final request. Nemo prepares to leave while Yui watches from a distance. Nemo recalls her kindness and cooking with a soft, appreciative smile before departing.
A soft patter sounding marks his departure as Yui watches him awkward manner.
Dissolving into light, Nemo steps through the exit and returns to his dimension.
Yui uses baking as a way to cope with her rising frustration.
She begins whisking ingredients together with a blank, focused look.
4 days pass as she misses Nemo's constant presence and desire to help around the house. She focuses on whisking the meringue, wishing she could clear her mind just as easily.
She struggles with guilt and worry over Nemo's fate until she decides to stop overthinking.
Chibi Yui bakes aggressively to ignore her guilt before being interrupted by a notification on her phone.
A message from her boss informs her that construction is delayed, requiring 2 more days off.
Yui stands in her kitchen, staring at the phone in stunned silence.
She reluctantly agrees to the extended break while complaining about the long renovation period.
She sets the phone down, realizing she is stuck at home even longer.
An empty silence hangs over the kitchen as she stands alone.
She declares that only sweets can save her now and begins whisking with manic energy.
A voice from the hallway announces the arrival of her friend Inzupi.
Mizuki stands shivering in the doorway, bundled up against the cold. Yui scolds her friend for forgetting the door code while Mizuki laughs off her mistake. Mizuki immediately smells the cookies and Yui confirms her hunch with a smile.
Mizuki begs for food while Yui happily agrees to share her baking. A plate of colorful, delicate meringue cookies is presented for dessert.
Mizuki eats happily, feeling completely revitalized by the sugary snack. Mizuki notices Yui's mood and demands to know why she is hiding her troubles.
She points out that the smell of baking was strong enough to be noticed from outside.
Mizuki confronts her friend directly, pointing a finger with a suspicious look. Mizuki claims Yui always bakes when she's troubled, though Yui tries to deny it.
They sit at the table with the plate of cookies between them.
Yui prepares to speak her friend's name as the atmosphere shifts.
She poses a hypothetical question about saving another world while Nemo's shadow looms in her mind.
Mizuki assumes she's been watching fantasy movies while Yui plays along with the excuse. Mizuki questions the benefits of heroism and firmly declares she would never go to another world.
Mizuki lists her real-life responsibilities and rejects the idea of interdimensional travel as unrealistic.
Mizuki asks if they would build her a high-end restaurant in the city center, and Yui notes that is true but remains skeptical.
A soft gata sounding follows as Mizuki stands from the table and expresses relief that no such magical world exists.
Yui reflects that talking to someone after a long time made her feel as if she were suddenly pulled back to reality.
Mizuki asks if she can take some cookies home because Yui's baking is the best, and Yui happily agrees.
Yui offers more snacks as she realizes she must face reality and focus on returning to work in 2 days.
A heavy dune sounding marks Yui's arrival at a scene of total destruction where her workplace used to stand.
Yui reaches out to a passerby, desperately calling for his attention as she stands amidst the rubble. She explains she is looking for the restaurant Shun no Manzai, while the man asks if she found it online.
The man informs her that the business went out of business about a week ago, leaving her stunned.
He continues to explain that the owner reportedly skipped town in the middle of the night.
A soft taboo sounding follows his feet as the man speculates the owner was in debt and everything became total chaos.
A dull baton sounding marks Yui's return to her apartment as she reflects on the news she heard from the police.
A soft zuru sounding follows as she leans against the door, noting that the rest of the staff could only register as victims.
A soft thud sounding follows her collapse to the floor as she feels overwhelmed and physically unable to move.
She realizes she needs to start looking for a new job as soon as possible.
She sits alone in the darkness of her apartment, completely defeated.
Yui stares at her shoes and thinks that she just cannot bring herself to care about anything anymore.
A vision of Nemo appears in her mind, begging for her strength to help save his dying world.
She remains huddled in place as the weight of her current life and Nemo's plea collide. Despair and hopelessness begin to take a firm hold of her spirit.
A faint Kira sounding occurs as she looks toward the hallway where Nemo once stood.
A soft stumble sounding follows her toward the shoe closet as she admits this is probably not a wise decision.
A faint Kira sounding follows her hand as she reaches for the door, realizing her choice is impulsive and foolish.
She stands before the open closet door as a mysterious blue light begins to emanate from within.
A soft Gyu sounding marks her internal struggle as she hesitates on the threshold of the portal.
She wonders what she should say upon arrival, ultimately deciding that finding Nemo is her absolute top priority.
She closes her eyes and takes a deep breath before moving forward.
A soft step sounding follows her as she finally crosses over into the unknown darkness.
Reaching out into the pitch black, she wonders if another world was truly supposed to be behind the closet. A sudden, powerful surge of water erupts around her as she enters the new dimension.
She is left wide-eyed and gasping by the sudden, overwhelming sensation of the transition. A massive wave sweeps her up and carries her away with incredible force. She sinks beneath the surface into a swirl of bubbles and cold water.
A soft Jiri sounding marks the heat of the sun over a quiet, tropical beach. A rhythmic za sounding follows the tide as it washes over the pale sand.
A soft splash sounding follows the water as it reaches Yui, who lies unconscious on the shore.
A slight twitch sounding marks the movement of her hand as she begins to wake.
A soft wish sounding follows the water as Yui pushes herself up and coughs. A soft zaz sounding follows the ocean waves as Yui sits up and looks around the empty beach.
She stares at the unfamiliar landscape with a look of pure confusion. A soft Kyoro sounding occurs as she looks about, wondering if she is in another world or just overseas. A soft Kyoro sounding follows her as she wonders why there is no hero around to save her like in stories.
She shouts out to the empty horizon, announcing that she has arrived to save their world.
A hollow shin sounding marks the absolute silence that greets her grand announcement.
A sharp gasp sounding follows her intense embarrassment as she realizes how awkward she looks.
She looks up at the blue sky and questions if she was far too reckless in her decision. A heavy silence hangs over the beach as she ponders her next move. A soft papa sounding occurs as she brushes herself off and tells herself it will be okay once she moves inland.
She gazes toward the nearby trees and decides to head further in to find any signs of life.
A soft gasa sounding follows her as she leaves the beach and enters a thick forest full of tall grass.
Yui searches for water among the grass. She is glad for the remaining daylight. A soft thud sounding follows her steps.
Moisture drips from the vibrant green leaves. Yui confirms her hunch with joyful certainty.
A soft step sounding marks her hurry. She runs toward the Kramas of water. A soft drip sounding echoes through trees.
Water trickles between the rocky mountain crevices. Yui cups the running water with hope.
A harsh gagging sounding follows her tank.
She coughs, noticing how salty it is.
Yui worries about the lack of drinkable water.
Sweat and fatigue cover her weary face. She refuses to surrender to her situation.
She hopes for a village's hospitality nearby.
Yui climbs over a massive falling log.
She seeks a higher point to survey.
A sudden gasp sounding escapes her lips.
Yui sees no rooftops, only a coastline.
A heavy thud sounding follows her collapse.
A hollow laugh sounding follows her realization. She wonders if this choice is wrong.
Yui fears that Nemo may have lied.
A faint sparkle sounding passes her eye.
Vibrant purple berries hang from the branches. The fruit glimmers under the forest light.
Small seeds scatter on the forest floor.
Yui eats berries despite the unknown danger.
She decides against waiting idly for Op. Yui contemplates the grim possibility of rescue.
She realizes building a raft takes months.
She fears being lost on endless widths.
Yui holds her food with quiet determination.
Action is always better than doing nothing.
She gathers materials at the forest's edge.
Yui decides to build a survival raft. The non-poisonous berries satisfy her hunger.
Fire is the next most important requirement.
Fire provides warmth and clean drinking water.
Yui grits her teeth in fierce concentration. Her hands spin the drill with speed.
A fierce shout sounding accompanies her effort.
Yui stops as a spark finally catches.
She gently blows to foster the flame. A sudden roar sounding signals her success. A heavy downpour sounding interrupts her peers. She stands stunned in the heavy downpour. A soft hiss sounding extinguishes her hope. Rain drenches her as her joy vanishes. A soft hiss sounding marks the end of her small fire.
Yui yells in frustration as her hard work is ruined by the rain. She laments the sudden storm and how quickly it extinguished the flames.
A soft drip sounding marks the rain falling from the forest leaves. Yui looks up as the water finally reaches her parched face.
She greedily drinks the falling rain with a soft swallow sounding. She realizes the water is fresh and feels immense relief as the storm continues. Yui huddles under the palm trees for a bit of cover. Her head clears and she begins to plan her next survival steps.
She decides to create leaf containers to store the precious rainwater.
Yui prepares to work through the night to ensure her survival.
A heavy downpour sounding continues as night falls over the island. A soft drip sounding follows the water as it fills her makeshift leaf bowls. She sits alone, wondering what her life back home would look like now. She imagines taking a hot bath and cooking a delicious meal in her apartment. She envisions relaxing in bed and talking to her friends after a long day.
She thinks about how she would be recharging to start her job hunt.
The memory of a formal job interview passes through her mind. A rhythmic za sounding marks the reality of the unrelenting storm outside. Yui sits quietly in the darkness, waiting for the rain to pass. She regrets not telling her friend Mizuki the truth before leaving reality. She realizes that nobody would ever think to look for her inside a shoe locker. A soft drip sounding continues to fill the leaf bowls as time passes. A bright light breaks through the clouds as the storm finally ends. The sun rises over the calm ocean, signaling a new day.
Yui stands on the beach, cold and exhausted from the long night. She reflects on the contradictions of human nature while watching a bird fly.
Despite her situation, she cannot ignore the pressing pangs of hunger and cold.
She gathers more purple berries to sustain herself for the day.
A soft swallow sounding follows as she drinks the stored rainwater.
She eats her breakfast while planning to build a more permanent shelter.
She is momentarily distracted by the thought of making sweet berry jam.
A soft slap sounding follows as she forces herself to focus on building a shelter. She reaffirms her absolute determination to survive on the island.
Yui begins organizing her supplies near the large beach rocks.
The tropical sun shines brightly through the palm tree branches.
A simple but sturdy leaf shelter is finally completed on the sand. She explores the island but finds no signs of life or other people.
She notes the strange absence of even the smallest insects in the forest.
She feels relieved about the lack of bugs but wonders if any fish are nearby.
Yui decides to explore the forest on the opposite side of the beach.
A rhythmic za sounding follows her bare feet across the warm sand.
She enters the forest wearing a leaf shawl, hoping to find something new.
A sudden shout sounding escapes her as she trips and falls into the mud. She stops and looks down, noticing something unusual about the ground.
She realizes something is wrapped around her leg and reaches down to pull it.
A soft squish sounding follows her hand as she examines the thick mud.
She sighs in frustration at her clumsy fall into the deep sludge. Her eyes widen in shock as she spots a startling discovery in the mud.
A quick thud sounding follows her feet as she runs toward the unknown. The brown-haired woman says that if she makes a fire to harden the soil, it should become a proper building material, allowing her to build a better shelter than just a roofed bed.
As she runs across the sand, she declares that she will make walls out of soil.
Wiping her brow after her hard work, she sighs in relief and says she thinks she has moved enough for now. She looks exhausted and tells herself it is time for a little break. Her eyes widen at mysterious colors.
She gazes across the vast ocean.
She laments that she has ended up in another strange place again. She collapses helplessly on the sand.
Weary resignation fills her tired face.
Beautiful weather feels like bitter irony.
Overlooking the shore, she says she is not sure if this is really the dying world Nemo talked about.
She sits isolated on the beach.
She admits to herself that what she does know is her own life is definitely falling apart.
Profound sadness fills her weary eyes. Looking at the horizon, she wonders if she can really survive here alone.
A soft crackle sounding follows the fish roasting over the fire.
A rhythmic crackle sounding continues as she stares blankly into the fire.
10 days pass on the island.
A sudden splash sounding follows the basket hitting the water.
She gradually adapts to island love.
A soft splash sounding follows her as she wades through the surf.
She notes that contrary to her worries, the sea was full of fish that maybe just weren't very cautious, as even tossing in an empty basket made them gather easily.
She explains that she only had to pull the basket up to catch fish, making it feel almost like an all-you-can-eat buffet.
She marvels at her abundant catch.
Walking along the shore, she tells herself that being comfortable doesn't mean she can stay here forever.
She resolves that while securing food and fixing up her shelter, she has also started building a boat to escape the island. She reaches for a roasted fish.
She bites into the flavorful fish.
A soft munching sounding follows her dither.
A rhythmic munching sounding follows her as she eats by the fire.
Only fish bones remain in sand.
She floats beneath the starry sky.
She observes that the night sky is beautiful, but this is a strange place with no animals despite the sea being full of fish.
She notes the strange rainbows and glowing clouds, and while the scenery is beautiful and the fish are easy to catch, she reaffirms that she does not want to stay forever.
She declares that she wants to finish the boat and escape as soon as possible, wishing that someone would come rescue her. A sturdy mud hut is finished.
A sharp scrape sounding follows her markings. Now with long white hair, she marks her 200th day since she started living on the island.
She admits she thought she would get bored without people or entertainment, but it all went by so fast.
She notes that preparing for the voyage took an unimaginable amount of effort.
She explains that she had to fish almost every day to build up food stores.
A soft cough sounding follows her as she notes she even made jars to preserve processed fish and salted berries. Salted fish fills a storage jar. She rests after a long waiter.
A rhythmic thud sounding follows her heart as she waits nervously.
A sudden sparkle sounding marks her success.
She declares the result was a huge success, as the fermented, salted seafood became a versatile ingredient during her time on the island. She focuses entirely on the boat.
She explains that to get out as quickly as possible, she identifies land beneath a distant rainbow after climbing to a high place.
A completed raft waits on shore.
Her hand brushes against the rough surface of a large clay jar. A soft sigh sounding follows Yui as she looks over her survival supplies.
She notes that her hair turned creamy and her skin sunburnt during her labor.
A soft fwa sounding follows as she touches a strand of her long hair.
She remembers her former life and the silence of her lonely mornings.
She observes that her face has become a mask of stoic indifference.
Loneliness grows within her despite becoming accustomed to the island's isolation.
She considers forgiving the man who disappeared as she walks the sand.
A rhythmic chop sounding follows her feet into the shallow surf. The day has finally come for her to leave the shore behind. Yui declares her departure from the island with absolute determination.
She feels emotional looking back at the hut she called home for a year.
She notes the traces of survival she is leaving behind on the beach.
Yui gazes out at the shimmering blue horizon from her raft.
A soft squeeze sounding follows her clenching fist as fear of storms arises.
She resolves that dying of old age alone is scarier than the sea.
Bright sunlight illuminates the clouds above the open ocean.
She stands tall on her raft as it drifts into the unknown. Tears well in her eyes during the emotional moment of leaving.
A sharp scrape sounding follows the stone cutting through the vine bindings.
A sudden swoosh sounding accompanies the sail unfurling in the ocean breeze.
A sudden splash sounding follows as the raft leaves the island forever.
The moon rises over the vast and empty sea.
A fierce roar sounding follows the storm as rain drenches the last.
Yui laments that life rarely follows one's plans as the storm rages.
A rhythmic crash sounding follows the waves battering her small vessel.
She huddles inside the cabin after 10 peaceful days were interrupted by broken jars.
A soft squeeze sounding follows as she tries to remain optimistic through exhaustion.
She explains how the weekly storms nearly swallowed her boat whole. A soft scrape sounding follows her hands as she clings to the cabin walls.
The storm finally breaks, revealing a bright and hopeful sky.
A rhythmic slosh sounding follows the raft locks through the calm water. The wooden structure creaks quietly as the voyage continues.
Yui stares blankly with dark circles under her eyes, fearing for her life. She plans to collect rainwater to secure her supply for the next leg.
She decides to tighten the vines after parts of the boat were damaged.
A heavy sigh sounding marks her weariness as she pauses.
She debates whether to eat or fix the boat first.
A soft scrape sounding follows her hand as she opens a storage jar. She notes the limited variety of food available while at sea. Her meal consists of dried fish, salted seafood, and pickled island fruits.
She finds comfort in the small luxury of her stored food.
A rhythmic munching sound follows as she bites into the dried fish.
She dreams of a hot, prepared meal while wondering about land ahead. A soft chew sounding follows as she longs for any human interaction.
She realizes she hasn't thought about Nemo in a very long time.
She recalls the man who is both her catalyst and her reason for isolation.
She reflects on his warnings about the world's immediate end. She notes that the world she sees while drifting is perfectly peaceful.
Yui wonders if Nemo lied to her about the state of reality. She wonders if her presence changed the world.
A soft thud sounding follows as she prays to be sent on.
Bright skies offer a temporary respite.
A tight squeeze sounding follows her pulling the bindings.
She worries that another storm will destroy her fragile vessel.
A soft pew sounding follows her wiping sweat away. Her attention is taken by a sudden, soft rustle sounding.
Hope flickers in her wide ass.
A firm squeeze sounding follows her grip as she spots land near Gray. A rhythmic thump sounding follows her heart as she thinks of Nemo.
A dull thud sounding follows her hand touching a wood.
A distant rumble sounding follows the darkening clouds. Violent waves toss the small raft. A heavy crash sounding follows as a sudden downpour hits her. She sees an island within reach. A sharp crack sounding follows as the raft begins to break. Despair fills her as she begs for mercy. She collapses amidst the raging storm.
The logs struggle against the sea.
A soft shh sounding follows her as she wakes. A massive silhouette emerges from the rain.
She weakly whispers a plea for help.
A sudden jerk sounding follows as she sees the giant ship nearby her.
She shouts with every ounce of strength.
The looming vessel represents her only hope. Tears stream down her rain-slicked face. A soft thump sounding follows her falling to her knees.
She stares in awe at her rescuers.
Exhaustion finally begins to take hold.
The raft drifts alongside the ship.
Voices from above check if she is still alive. She kneels on the alien deck. A soft whoosh sounding follows as she looks at the figures above.
A voice warns her about an incoming harpoon.
The heavy spear secures the waft.
A rhythmic clatter sounding follows her climb up the ladder.
She finally stands on a real ship. She is stunned to see people with animal ears. The woman in a red coat notes her ragged condition.
She is welcomed aboard the Burning Dolphin.
The black-haired woman with feline ears introduces herself as Captain Visby.
Yui struggles to find her words.
The crew gathers around the bedraggled newcomer. A soft swish sounding follows the captain's tail as Yui walks. A sudden flinch sounding follows as someone calls her a frog. The white-haired man with wolf ears, Knox, demands the disgusting human be thrown back. Knox suggests sending her away on her broken raft instead of murder. A soft thump sounding follows as Visby defends the human's life. The captain points out Yui's emaciated and emotional fate. The green-haired crewman agrees with the captain's observation.
Knox admits it feels wrong to send a human away in the pouring rain.
The white-haired man turned to Leagues. A soft tisk sounding follows Knox as he threatens to kill her if she causes trouble. A sudden slam sounding follows the vice captain as he leaves the confused pair behind. Visby introduces the man as the vice captain and suggests delaying formal introductions. The captain orders the crew to clear the raft and return to their parse. Visby offers to give the long-haired survivor a tour of the ship. Visby promises a cabin and food after one initial task is completed. Yui enthusiastically pledges her hard work to the captain. Visby tells Yui to wash up because she smells absolutely terrible. A steaming wooden tub offers a luxurious bath. Yui walks through the hallway with clean laundry. Yui finds the provided soap and brush amazing compared to her island life. She feels relieved to wear proper clothes after a long time. Yui notes the awkward tail hole in the back of the pants. Yui steps forward in sturdy brown boots.
She reflects on how much her hair and skin have changed.
Yui sees a stranger in her own reflection. Her hair is waist-length and her skin is deeply tanned. She observes her new muscle and the weight she have lost.
Yui wonders about the animal-like traits of her new companions. She hopes the people she finally met won't hate her.
Visby enters the room and asks if Yui is finished with her knife. A sudden patter sounding follows as Visby suggests talking over some food.
They sit together in the ship's crowded dining hall.
Yui nervously looks at the crew member.
A rhythmic twitch sounding follows the ears of the curious surrounding crew.
Yui confirms her readiness to talk to the captain.
Visby laughs and tells Yui there's no need to be so tense.
The captain explains they are curious about what kind of human she is. Visby jokingly suggests they might have rescued a fleeing mer.
The captain asks why Yui was found drifting in the ocean.
A soft fidget sounding follows Yui's nervous hands as she hesitates.
Yui stares down at her bowl of white sip.
She wonders what she should say about her arrival.
Yui worries that telling the truth about other dimensions will be suspicious.
Visby watches Yui intently while waiting for her answer. A sudden crash sounding follows Yui's regret over her awkward words.
Visby admits she has never heard of interdimensional travel.
A soft gulp sounding follows Yui's decision to risk everything on the truth.
Yui asks Visby what she thinks about travel between worlds.
Yui reveals that she originated from a different world.
She tells the captain she was asked to save this world.
Yui resolves to keep Nemo and the forest secret for safety. She describes her mission as a divine revelation.
A soft sliding sounding follows Visby's hand as she processes the story.
Visby concludes that the survivor has completely lost her mind. The captain decides Yui isn't dangerous and orders her to be given work. Yui feels relieved to eat despite being treated like a crazy person.
She experiences the emotional taste of her first real meal.
Ken Yu-jung makes a disgusted face. She declares the soup tastes like dirt and refuses to let it slide as a chef. 5 days have passed on the burning Gulfin. She wakes up and stretches in her cabin.
A sudden rustle sounding follows as a crewman greets her and she returns the morning greeting.
A moment of quiet morning stillness.
She reflects on how well the crew has accepted her despite her crazy stories.
She tries to greet Knox, but he tells the frog to shut up and storms off.
She notes that Knox still hasn't warm-up to her.
A quick swish sounding follows the vice captain as he leaves the room.
She remains optimistic despite the harsh treatment.
The dining hall is filled with the presence of others.
She greets several lively crew members while walking through the ship.
She loudly calls out to Alter.
Her face glows with excitement. She enters the kitchen and is immediately told to start peeling potatoes.
She agrees as the pink-haired wolfman, Chef Alter, watches her.
Her service on the ship continues. She focuses intently on the task at hand.
Alter instructs her to peel all the potatoes and keep them whole.
She asks to cook a separate dish, but Alter warns her that Knox's sharp nose would detect her involvement. She is surprised to learn that Knox simply hates all humans.
A sudden clatter sounding follows as Alter tells her to ignore the hate and remove fish bones.
Alter asks what Knox said to her and she tries to play dumb. She admits he told her to shut it, frog.
She questions why he chose to call her a frog of all things.
Alter points to his own ears, noting her lack of ears and a tail.
He explains that his people express all their emotions through their animal traits.
He notes that humans seem expressionless and creepy to them, much like frogs. She is devastated to hear that she is considered chilling and creepy.
Alter reassures her that he knows she is good and that the crew doesn't hate her.
Kitchen supplies sit neatly on the shelf.
She returns with a work with a heavy heart.
A soft scratch sounding follows Alter as he ponders.
Alter calls out her folding.
A sudden flinch sounding follows as he asks if she enjoys cooking.
He grants her permission to cook one serving for herself as long as she stays out of trouble.
She promises to clean everything up afterward with a bright smile.
A sudden voice asks what good news has happened.
Captain Visby enters the room with a grin.
Visby teases that Alter complained about her pestering, though the chef shrugs it off.
The captain asks her to make 2 servings and bring them to her quarters for a talk.
Alter reluctantly agrees to let her use the kitchen for the captain's request.
A rhythmic thump sounding follows her heart as she glows with joy.
She searches the storage room for potential ingredients.
She resolves to use common ingredients so she doesn't become a nuisance to the crew.
She examines the various dried and salted meats available.
She finds fresh vegetables growing in pots because the ship lacks refrigeration.
She carefully considers her limited choices for the upcoming meal. She begins by expertly filleting a fresh fish.
Yui prepares shrimp and clams alongside the fresh fish.
She carefully pats the seafood dry and seasons it with salt. Fresh tomatoes, onions, and herbs are gathered for the recipe.
Lacking oil, Yui decides to render lard from pieces of salted pork fat.
A rhythmic sizzle sounding follows as she melts the pork fat in a pot.
The prepared seafood is tossed into the rendered oil.
She works efficiently, stirring the ingredients in the large metal pot.
Sliced tomatoes are added to create a rich, colorful base. She finishes the dish by sprinkling a blend of aromatic spices. 2 vibrant bowls of seafood stew are finally ready for service. She is mesmerized by the incredible scent and colors of her cooking.
Pride and satisfaction fill her as she looks at her creation.
She announces her arrival at Visby's quarters, and the hungry captain welcomes her.
She enters the room with a cheerful smile and the steaming balls.
Visby leans in, captivated by the wonderful aroma of the meal.
The captain praises the food's appearance and thanks her for the effort.
Visby quickly clears the maps and bottles off her desk to Minkor.
A silver fork reaches toward the perfectly cooked shrimp.
They sit together as Visby declares everything is ready to eat.
Visby anticipates the first taste as she lifts a shrimp. The black-haired captain takes a large, eager bite of the seafood. Her golden eyes widen in absolute shock at the flavor. A sudden crash sounding follows the impact of the incredible taste on the captain.
Yui watches anxiously as Visby chews in intense silence.
Yui worries that her time away from a kitchen has ruined her skills. She watches the captain's slow, methodical chewing with growing dread.
Desperate for answers, Yui decides to taste the dish herself.
Her own eyes widen in surprise as the flavor hits her. She reflects on the perfect crispness and the explosion of savory umami. She is overcome with emotion at tasting real flavor after so long.
Visby stops eating and calls Yui by her full name.
The captain declares with a shout that Yui is an absolute genius. Visby stands up excitedly, leaning across the table in awe. She demands to know how Yui achieved such an amazing texture.
Visby admits she is speechless, and Yui promises to cook for her again.
The captain is struck by a sudden, brilliant idea. Visby lunges forward and tightly grasps Yui's hands.
Yui is startled and confused by the captain's sudden intensity.
Visby appoints Yui as the new head chef of the Burning Dolphin.
The captain ignores her shock and begs her to accept a role.
Yui expresses her concerns about replacing Alter or Nox's disapproval.
Visby explains that Alter has other duties and can't focus on cooking.
A soft shiver sounding follows Nox on deck as Visby mocks Alter's soup.
Visby celebrates Yui's agreement with a wide-fanged grin. The captain suddenly remembers the actual reason she called for Yui.
The Burning Dolphin sails peacefully across the vast blue ocean.
Visby reveals that Yui will have to disembark at a trading city soon.
They continue their conversation over the remaining food.
Yui is devastated to learn her time on the ship is limited.
Visby explains that humans are strictly forbidden in their homeland.
Visby says the whole city is full of guys like Nox.
Visby explains she and her crew are used to humans because of trade, but people in her homeland usually dislike the tailless ones and suggests Yui wouldn't want to go there anyway.
Yui asks if the trading city called Gerhain is a place where humans like her are allowed to enter. Visby confirms while looking for a map.
Visby points at the easternmost land on the map, explaining it's a hub for adventurers, while Yui realizes she can't read a single word of the script.
Yui notices something strange.
Yui points to a specific spot on the map, wondering what it represents.
Yui notes that while the rest of the map is packed with writing, this particular spot is empty.
Visby addresses Yujong Kang, asking if her inability to read proves she really is from another world, and Yui confirms her story. A red narrative bubble identifies the mysterious location as the Land of Tragedy.
The area is described as the domain of the demon Finneker Diobirda, a living hell on earth where demons dance.
A dark, eerie view of a ruined cityscape with statues.
Yui is struck by the name of the place, recalling something.
She remembers that the Land of Tragedy was exactly what Nemo had explained to her before. Visby mentions a rumor that has been circulating for a year, catching Yui's attention.
The captain looks focused as she prepares to share information.
Visby explains that adventurers are flocking to the Land of Tragedy to make fortunes, which has made the neighboring city of Gerhain even more crowded. A hazy flashback shows Yui's life on the island exactly 1 year ago.
Yui realizes she has influenced this world just by surviving on the island, and she asks if demons will emerge if the barrier is gone.
A quick nod sounding follows Visby as she confirms that border cities are occasionally attacked. Visby mentions that mages, including an impressive one in Gerhain, have been dispatched to handle the situation, but warns Yui that mages are selfish and best avoided.
Visby gestures dismissively as she finishes her explanation.
Yui is fascinated to learn that mages actually exist in this world, despite the captain's warning.
Visby tells Yui that they recovered the mostly worthless items from her boat when they rescued her.
Visby notes that the dried fish and pickled fruits were high quality and she kept them safe so Yui can sell them and avoid becoming a beggar in Gerhain.
Visby estimates the goods are worth 300 geld, the local currency, and promises to pay Yui extra for her work as a chef.
Yui wonders how long 300 geld will last her in the city.
Visby lists the basic costs, 20 geld for a cheap inn and 5 for food, meaning Yui could last 10 days on the bare minimum.
Visby warns that the cheapest inn is full of fleas and would require shaving her head, though a better room would cost 50 geld.
Visby reassures the worried Yui that she has the skills to find work in a restaurant. Visby offers to recommend Yui to the merchant guild she deals with, since they likely own a restaurant or two. The captain gives Yui a confident, reassuring look.
Visby tells Yui not to be so touched and notes that she will start her official work tomorrow after Alter finishes today's dinner.
Yui clasps her hands together in overwhelming gratitude. Promotional characters stand together on a recruitment page.
A loud bustle sounding follows the crew in the crowded dining hall.
2 surprised crewmen stop mid-bite to admire the quality of the new meal.
A diner looks at his empty bowl in disbelief, declaring the food amazing.
They loudly compare the delicious dish to Alter's previous efforts, much to the chef's irritation.
Laughter and shouting fill the air as crewmen fight over the remaining portions.
Yui watches from the doorway with a sigh of relief, happy to see everyone enjoying her cooking.
She notes that Nox is the only one who refuses to eat anything she prepares.
The red-haired vice captain stubbornly eats a bowl of Alter's fishy soup instead.
Time passes quickly as 15 days fly by in a blur of hard work.
Even on exhausting days where she crashes into her bunk, Yui finds a new kind of happiness.
She sleeps with a peaceful smile on her face. Her routine involves kneading bread for lunch long before the sun rises.
Yui works diligently in the ship's kitchen, focused on preparing dinner.
A rhythmic sizzle sounding follows as fresh shrimp and mussels cook in a pan.
A finished bowl of hearty vegetable and seafood stew sits ready for serving.
She continues her service by preparing fish pancakes and steamed fish with special sauces.
Fresh varieties of bread are prepared daily.
Yui crafts specialty sauces using plants found in the storage room.
She notices her popularity among the crew is rising.
A brown-haired man with cot ears approaches Yui in the kitchen.
The crew member named Vague is happy she remembered his name. He admits his visits are motivated by duty and a desire to see her.
A sudden heavy thud sounding follows his shock as she reveals there are no snacks.
He tries to deny his interest in snacks despite Yui's knowing small.
Vague asks why there are none, and Yui explains a recent problem.
She reveals that food is being stolen frequently at dawn.
Yui expresses her surprise that food would be targeted this way.
She admits she hasn't identified any specific suspects yet.
Yui kindly suggests the thief should just ask for a proper meal instead. Vague is outraged by her soft-hearted response to the theft.
He frantically shakes her while demanding they catch and punish the thief.
Yui questions the need for a stir since they disembark in 4 days.
A sudden, firm clench sounding follows Vague's refusal to forgive the stolen snacks. A bright, intense flare sounding follows their vow to ambush the thief.
Vague suddenly notices a strange, faint smell lingering in the keken.
A soft, rhythmic bubbling sound comes from a large metal pot.
He asks about the boiling mixture, which she identifies as yacht.
Yui asks for a moment as she finishes the preparation.
She presents him with a cup of the hot, steaming liquid. Yui explains that the treat is still in the process of being made. She encourages him to give the warm mixture a try. Vague carefully takes a sip of the sweet substance.
He is immediately stunned by the incredible sweetness of the drink.
The man is amazed, wondering if the flavor is similar to candy.
Narration explains how rare sugar and honey are in this world.
Yui reveals she is making the treat as a special parting gift. She explains the long process of kneading malt to extract sweetness.
The liquid is boiled down to create a thick, dark taffy.
She demonstrates how the taffy is stretched by hand before it hardens.
The final result is the common white stick taffy.
Yui whispers for him to keep her secret gift-making quiet.
A soft bubble sounding returns as they prepare for the dawn ambush.
The ship remains quiet under the deep blue night sky.
Yui and Vague hide together in a barrel to wait for the intruder.
Vague complains about the wait while Yui offers to let her rest.
She suddenly senses movement as someone enters the room.
A long, slow creak sounding follows the kitchen door being opened.
A tall, silhouetted figure with wolf ears enters the dark kitchen. The intruder reaches for a ladle and begins taking food.
Vague suddenly shouts for the thief to stop right there. He lunges from hiding, yelling about the stolen snacks. Vague grabs the thief by the collar to unmask him.
Yui watches the chaotic unmasking with a look of pure shock.
The thief is revealed to be the white-haired man with wolf ears. A quick, sharp rattle sounding follows the realization that the thief is Nox.
They both stare in absolute disbelief at the embarrassed vice captain.
Yui reflects on the vice captain's secret habit of stealing leftovers. A quick, sharp flinch sounding follows Nox as he nervously addresses her.
Yui kindly requests that Vague keep the incident secret for Nox's sake.
A rhythmic, quick tap sounding follows Vague as he departs for Mad.
A soft, low creak sounding follows the door as Vague leaves.
The narrative focuses on the vice captain's awkward and embarrassed predicament.
Yui suggests they have quite a serious conversation ahead of them.
Nox sweats nervously while avoiding her gaze in the dark kitchen.
Various kitchen tools sit idle as the tension hangs between them.
A heavy, silent air sounding follows the two sitting together in silence.
They share a long moment of uncomfortable and hesitant silence.
Nox begins explaining his initial intentions regarding her specialty cooking.
He recounts the specific day she first began preparing potatoes for soup.
In a flashback, he describes his deep prejudice against her human race.
A soft, low snort sounding follows Nox as he recalls his skepticism.
He remembers how the scent of her food captivated the entire ship.
A sudden, sharp swish sounding follows Nox as he turns away in disgust. He admits his repulsion was quickly overtaken by his growing hunger.
Nox reflects on the internal conflict regarding his pride and appetite.
He describes the torment of watching others eat her delicious meals daily.
A heavy, rhythmic gulp sounding follows Nox's struggle with old fish soup.
He feared becoming a laughingstock by showing any friendliness toward her.
A slow, steady stomp sounding follows his nightly walks toward the galley.
A soft, quick rustle sounding follows Nox as he peeks inside the room.
He reveals the fear that his own crew would mock him. Yui listens sympathetically as he describes his intense food-related anxiety dreams.
Knox realized he would regret never tasting her food before she disembarked.
He chose theft over conversation to preserve his fading sense of pride.
Yui understands that his hostility was driven by a fear of discovery.
A sudden firm clench sounding follows Knox's admission of his thorny behavior.
A soft, rhythmic bubble sounding follows the food cooking on the stove. The white-haired man bows low while asking for her sincere forgiveness.
A quick, sharp startle sounding follows Knox as she accepts his apology.
Yui promises secrecy and tells him to stand tall and proud. Knox is visibly relieved to find she isn't genuinely angry with him. A heavy, rhythmic gulp sounding follows Knox as she sets her conditions. A soft, knowing chuckle sounding follows Yui's gentle and reassuring smile. The setting shifts as a new morning begins on the galley deck. A sudden, loud shout sounding follows Alter's shock at the surprising news.
Alter is ecstatic to learn he no longer cooks for the vice captain. Yui confirms that the white-haired man will finally eat her meals. She prepares a seafood feast while considering the vice captain's fragile perspective.
Yui finds joy in her work as she cooks for the crew. A loud, busy murmur sounding follows the crew gathering for their breakfast.
A soft, quick thump sounding follows Yui's heartbeat as she waits expectantly.
The vice captain enters the room with a look of quiet, tense resolve. Knox officially requests his meal, ending their long and difficult standoff.
Yui celebrates the success of their newfound and mutual understanding.
A sharp, firm top sounding follows the steaming bowl being served up.
A soft, rhythmic chew sounding follows Knox as he finally enjoys his breakfast. Knox watches from the side as the crew prepares to eat. Yui flinches as a gloved hand suddenly touches her shoulder.
Visby offers Yui a bright, encouraging smile.
Knox enjoys the secret sweetness of the handmade treat.
Yui prepares to deliver her speech.
The girl laughs and happily agrees with the sentiment. The ship finally docks at a massive Stone City harbor. A bustling crowd awaits at the busy port. Yui proudly looks over the finished sticks of toffee. She announces that these are her final gifts for the burning dolphin.
Yui smiles while presenting her very last parting present.
She explains the treat is called yote and she made it for everyone. The crew members whisper in confusion about how to eat the hard sticks.
A sudden rhythmic crunching sounding follows Knox and Vague testing the candy.
The vice captain tells the staring crew to stop and just eat. A dark-haired crewman tentatively tries the heart fleet.
A sharp rhythmic snap sounding follows him biting the stick.
A sudden loud whoa sounding follows the realization of the flavor. They exclaim about the incredible sweetness while Yui watches from behind.
Yui looks deeply moved by their enthusiastic reactions.
Visby asks if she is certain about giving away such high-value sweets.
Yui explains she used the ship's existing supplies and wants to give back.
The crew celebrates together as Visby dismisses her initial concerns.
Yui is filled with genuine, sparkling happiness.
The morning sun shines through clear blue skies.
Yui stands on the deck while gazing at the horizon.
She is stunned by the magnificent sight before her.
Yui excitedly announces their arrival at the Grand City.
She observes the streets overflowing with a massive crowd. She marvels at seeing the city she missed right before her.
Yui clasps her hands in pure joyful wonder.
Her smile falters as a sudden thought occurs. She notices the incredible diversity of the people around her. She feels as if she has stepped into a fantasy game.
Yui notes that even the animals are beyond her expectations.
A soft, quick thump sounding follows Yui bumping into a chinder.
A three-eyed woman snaps at her, leaving Yui completely shocked. The stranger grumbles about Yui's reaction to her multiple eyes. A sudden firm grip sounding follows a hand grabbing Yui's arm.
Visby catches up and asks what the girl is doing. The captain offers to teach the rude woman a lesson.
Visby tells her to follow along to their next destination.
They approach a grand building with long stone stairs.
Yui brings up the promised introduction to a kitchen top.
They stand before the doors of a massive merchant building.
Visby enters the guild while calling out for attention.
She announces that she has come to see a man named Gent.
A blonde woman named Lysa is identified as the guild secretary.
Lysa confirms that Gent is waiting and rings a signal bell.
A rhythmic, steady stomp sounding follows them down the long hallway.
Visby mentions Gent as a regular merchant partner she plans to ask for help regarding Yui.
Visby and Yui ascend a wide stone staircase inside the Grand Merchant Guild builder.
The silhouettes of Yui and Visby stand before a massive, ornate wooden door.
A quick, sharp creak sounding follows the door as Visby greets a merchant named Gent.
The merchant reminds her that she is 2 months past their agreed-upon gate.
Gent, a sharp-featured man with a monocle, accepts Visby's apology for the delay.
Visby urges Yui to sit while Gent impatiently asks about the goods she brought. Visby presents a document to the guild official in the dimly lit office.
Gent focuses on the paper with a look of intense concentration.
A soft, quick tap sounding follows Gent as he admits the numbers are still insufficient.
Visby mentions the bustling streets while Gent dismisses the ambitious adventurers as suicide candidates. He explains that the vanishing barrier on the land of tragedy has led many to their doom.
Gent notes the archipelago's indifference to continental affairs while Visby chuckles in agreement. Visby suggests that low supplies must have driven the market price of their goods up.
She boldly requests 20,000 geld per piece for their current shipment.
Gent is stunned by the request, noting the actual market price is $22,000.
Visby admits she is offering a discount in exchange for a favor.
She presents Yui with a mischievous grin, much to the girl's clear discomfort.
Yui looks on with a mix of confusion and mounting anxiety.
The narrative shifts to a wide view of a diverse crowd in the city plaza. Gent and Yui walk together through the manicured grounds of the Guild District.
The sun shines over a grand multi-storied building with classical architecture.
They arrive at the entrance of a massive and impressive stone structure. Visby explains that her favor involves finding a place for Yui to stay and work.
A sharp, quick glare sounding follows Gent as he scrutinizes the nervous girl.
Gent calls Yui an idiot, but Visby defends her as a talented traveler who is simply overwhelmed.
Visby reveals that Yui lived alone on a deserted island for an entire year.
Gent realizes her social awkwardness stems from her long isolation as Yui questions her own expression.
He demands to know the specifics of the favor, threatening to refuse anything unreasonable.
Visby officially requests that Gent find Yui a job and keep a close eye on her.
A heavy, silent air sounding follows the three of them sitting together in the office.
Gent is insulted by the idea of babysitting an adult until Visby mentions the risk of scams.
She jokes that Yui's naive face would lead her into a slave contract within 30 minutes.
Yui is deeply offended by the suggestion that she looks completely ignorant of the world.
Visby explains the massive discount was an apology for her tardiness, which Gent begrudgingly accepts.
Gent inquires about Yui's skills while Visby enthusiastically praises her incredible cooking abilities.
Flashbacks show the crew of the Burning Dolphin overjoyed by the food Yui prepared on the ship.
Yui shyly requests a position that includes both room and board for her convenience.
Gent remains silent as he processes the unusual request from the pirate captain.
A soft, quick sliding sounding follows Gent as he begins searching through stacks of job notices.
He produces a pile of official job information registered with the Merchants Guild. Gent presents a list of establishments currently seeking experienced kitchen staff.
He explains the limited options for someone without identification, unaware that Yui cannot even read the list.
A sudden, sharp sigh sounding follows Gent as he realizes Yui is completely illiterate.
Yui sheepishly explains that literacy never seemed necessary while she was focused on her kitchen work.
Gent stares at her with a look of pure, unadulterated disbelief.
He agrees to help as Visby nervously tries to smooth over the awkward situation. Gent narrows the search to 5 inns where her inability to read won't be a hindrance.
A sudden, quick rustle sounding follows Gent as he describes a kitchen job at the Golden Fleece Inn.
He mentions the Bellowing Cow Inn, which offers a soup-making position but lodging in a shed.
Gent describes the Roasted Ox Inn, noting the low pay and stable side lodging as Yui stutters a question. Yui worries about sleeping with horses, while Gent clarifies that the living situation isn't quite that literal. He explains the room is a tack storage area that smells like manure and mentions she might have to help with the animals.
Yui declines the offer to focus on her literacy studies, prompting Gent to suggest his final option.
He presents the Wild Log Inn, which offers a head chef position with solo cooking and attic lodging.
Gent bluntly describes the owner of the inn as a complete and total idiot.
He advises against the job, noting that a head chef usually earns far more and should not have to work alone for such low pay.
Visby expresses her confidence in Gent's ability to protect the girl from trouble. Yui looks determined as she considers the risks of being scammed in her new environment.
Gent looks on with a skeptical and unimpressed expression.
Gent admits the innkeeper's simplicity might be a safeguard against anyone trying to exploit someone as naive as Yui.
Yui considers the benefits of the job, especially the privacy of the attic and the chance to run the kitchen solo.
She hopes to avoid conflict and build a life where she isn't disliked by those around her.
Gent announces it's time to head out and meet the owner as Yui eagerly agrees.
Visby suddenly stops to say her farewells, catching the white-haired girl completely off guard. The captain laughs at the girl's shocked expression during their prodding.
Yui is deeply moved by the sudden realization that her journey with the crew has ended.
She asks if they will cross paths again, and Visby warmly reassures her that they will.
Visby explains her regular docking schedule and promises to find her with Gent's help while the merchant urges them to move along.
Visby tells her to stay in touch during her visits as Yui gives a final, cheerful promise.
The scene shifts to the quiet outskirts of the city as Gent leads Yui to a modest stone building.
Yui notes the lack of foot traffic in the area before Gent leads her inside.
A quick, sharp creak sounding follows the door opening to reveal a large, bearded man sitting alone at a counter.
A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows the man as he stands up and asks if they are customers. Gent clarifies their purpose as Yui watches the intimidating man with wide house.
Gent asks if the establishment is still in need of staff members.
Yui wonders if this simple-looking man is the kind-hearted fool Gent mentioned earlier.
The bearded man looks a bit flustered as he considers the two visitors.
He asks if Yui is there specifically to apply for the open kitchen position.
Yui offers a shy and polite greeting to her potential new employer.
A rhythmic, steady stomp sounding follows the man as he leads them further into the empty inn.
The owner kindly offers to bring them some food since the dinner hour is approaching.
Yui stares in horror at a bowl of purplish soup, noting its suspicious color and pungent aroma. She realizes it's remarkably similar to the terrible porridge she saw before and determines it's inedible. The owner encourages her to eat freely since the food isn't selling anyway, which only makes Yui feel more pity for him. Yui politely declines by blaming land sickness, while Gent bluntly insults the food's quality.
The owner sadly agrees with the criticism as Gent continues to point out the obvious business flaws.
The innkeeper admits he tried to manage alone but couldn't overcome the constant complaints about the flavor.
He explains that the bad reputation eventually drove away almost all of his customers. Yui reflects on the man's struggles and the desperate reason behind his search for a chef.
A soft, quick top sounding follows Gent as he finishes the meal and thanks the owner.
The owner tells them not to worry and heads off to clear the table.
A heavy, rhythmic stomp sounding follows the man as he heads back to the kitchen.
Yui sits in silence while processing the dire state of the inn. Gent notes that the failing business and the owner's overly generous nature are a recipe for bankruptcy.
He asks the girl if she's truly certain about committing to work in such a struggling place.
Yui argues that the lack of customers actually makes the generous offer of room and board even better.
The bearded man returns to the table and apologizes for his brief absence.
A sudden, quick rustle sounding follows Gent as he produces the official employment contract.
Yui watches with interest as the owner prepares to introduce himself and finalize the agreement.
The bearded man introduces himself as Larkin, the owner of the Wild Log Inn who manages both the cleaning and the kitchen. He admits that due to a lack of guests, his budget for hiring staff is extremely limited.
Inside the kitchen, Larkin suggests they work as a team where she takes over the cooking while he continues to handle all the room cleaning.
Gent introduces himself as a merchant and explains that he is currently acting as the girl's legal guardian. The girl introduces herself as Kang Yu-jung, but Gent immediately interjects to inform Larkin that she is completely illiterate.
Kang Yu-jung is visibly shocked by his bluntness, questioning if he is actually trying to help her. Gent confirms that his presence is necessary to ensure the employment contract is handled correctly.
Larkin looks on with a flustered and slightly nervous expression.
Pointing to bowls of unappetizing pinkish soup, Larkin explains that the lack of customers makes it impossible to offer a high wage. He notes that the current offer was only raised slightly because no one else had applied for the position.
Gent inquires if the wages can be increased later if her cooking leads to a rise in sales. Larkin looks surprised but quickly agrees that he would be happy to raise her pay under those circumstances.
The three of them sit together in the quiet, dim dining area as they discuss the terms.
Kang Yu-jung considers what her life will be like if she decides to commit to working at the inn.
She maintains a look of steady determination while weighing her options.
She imagines the potential for growth and success in her new environment.
Her thoughts drift to the diverse people she might encounter in the city.
Kang Yu-jung reflects on how disastrous Larkin's own cooking skills seem to be, realizing how much the business truly needs her.
The girl asks if she can see the attic room, and Larkin happily agrees to show her the way.
Larkin leads them through the inn and indicates a room located at the far end of the second floor.
A quick, sharp creak sounding follows Kang Yu-jung as she cautiously pushes open the wooden door.
She observes that the room is completely bare except for a bed and is covered in a thick layer of dust from long-term neglect.
Despite the mess, the girl looks at the space with a sense of wonder and hope.
She is moved to tears by the privacy and sunlight, comparing it favorably to her lonely hut on the island and the cramped shared quarters on the ship.
Gent remarks that it is essentially a guest room, which Larkin confirms by noting the current lack of travelers.
Gent decides the arrangement is beneficial, but the girl tells him to stop talking, frustrated by his constant, blunt reminders of the inn's failure.
Larkin instructs her to clean her new room today and prepare to take full charge of the kitchen starting tomorrow. The girl is relieved to see that Larkin remains kind and unfazed by Gent's harsh observations.
Kang Yu-jung holds the official document as the contract process proceeds without any further issues.
Gent reads the legal text aloud for her benefit while the girl nods her head in agreement.
The primary terms of the agreement state that she is now staff of the inn and responsible for all cooking duties from morning until night.
She is particularly excited by a specific clause that guarantees her personal time for herself.
Larkin adds that he is willing to teach her how to read during the slow hours when there are no guests to serve.
Gent advises her to seek him out if she ever wants to change jobs, offering her a position as his personal errand runner.
He mentions that his recent business dealings with Visby were very profitable, allowing him to easily afford her salary. Kang Yu-jung laughs at the generous offer while Larkin watches them with a look of pure comedic panic. Despite the tempting alternative, she realizes that her true passion is still in the kitchen. The scene shifts to the exterior of the modest stone and brick inn.
The morning sun shines over the quiet building nestled near the edge of the city. The interior of the dining area remains empty and still as the new day begins.
Kang Yu-jung pushes open the window of her attic room, letting the light spill inside. She enjoys the fresh morning breeze and reminds herself of her first task, fetching water for the day's chores.
The girl gives a big stretch and resolves to get her new life started on the right foot.
Kang Yu-jung carries a large ceramic jar toward a stone well in a bustling part of the city.
She notices the local residents pausing to whisper and stare as she passes by them.
Someone calls out to her and she turns around with a look of surprise.
A group of stern-looking locals, including a woman in a green apron, confront her and demand to know who she is.
The girl is startled and confused by the sudden attention from the crowd.
The group surrounds her, repeating their demand for her identity since they don't recognize her face. Kim Yoo-jung becomes increasingly nervous, wondering if she is about to be bullied or hazed by the neighborhood residents.
A woman with brown hair explains that she knows everyone in the area and is certain the girl is a complete stranger.
The woman asks for her name, leaving the white-haired girl momentarily stunned and speechless. Looking at the surrounding architecture, she realizes the group was simply curious about a new arrival.
She takes a deep breath and tells herself to stay calm as she prepares to answer.
Kim Yoo-jung officially introduces herself as the new head chef of the Wild Log Inn.
Yoo-jung beams at the crowd and says that it's nice to meet all of them. A sudden cold hush sounding follows the girl as the neighborhood residents exchange bewildered glances.
The dark-skinned woman with pointed ears looks skeptical and asks if she truly means that specific inn.
She bluntly states that the food at that establishment is terrible, as Yoo-jung can only offer a stunned response.
The woman wonders if a new chef can really change the inn's reputation, while the girl realizes the place is even more notorious than she feared.
Yoo-jung politely excuses herself to go prepare for business as the locals offer friendly farewells, leaving her to resolve that she only cares about the future.
She carries the heavy jar back.
Morning light fills the quiet inn.
She assesses the inn's quiet kitchen.
Looking into a wooden tub, she notes that Larkin has provided several different types of fresh fish.
She decides she should use all the fish immediately since it won't stay fresh for very long.
She settles on making a hearty fish soup filled with plenty of large chunks. She begins the process by cleaning and preparing the fish, noting that the ingredients are identical to the failed porridge Larkin made.
A sharp, steady chop sounding follows her as she works, reflecting that her preparation is on an entirely different level compared to Larkin's scaly soup.
As she continues to slice the fish, she thinks that while rice would be ideal, the locals seem to prefer bread. She looks around the kitchen and realizes she lacks the ingredients for bread, prompting her to search for a suitable substitute for rice. Her eyes widen in sudden realization.
She points toward a large sack and decides that those contents will work perfectly.
Holding a potato, she smiles and thinks that they will be a delicious addition to the fish soup.
She adds large chunks of peeled potatoes to a pot of water that has already been brought to a boil.
While the potatoes cook, she carefully slices the fish fillets into thick pieces so they don't fall apart. She seasons the simmering pot with salt, deciding to skip spices since none are available in the kitchen.
Taking a small taste, she finds the flavor refreshing and similar to a dried pollock soup enriched with fresh fish.
A sudden, bright splash sounding follows her.
Water flows into the cooking pots.
She prepares the large ceramic tar.
She hangs the pot over the heat, explaining that she can keep it warm and prevent it from getting too salty by adding small amounts of water. A steaming bowl of fresh soup.
She considers taking a bite for herself before her employer arrives to begin the workday.
Larkin enters the kitchen and notes that she is up quite early, to which she explains she went to bed early and asks if he slept well.
The owner confirms he rested well.
She offers him a bowl of her fresh fish soup and he happily accepts the invitation.
Larkin admits he was already curious about the wonderful smell wafting through the inn and is delighted to find it's the soup.
A rhythmic, light top sounding follows him as he places the bowl down and remarks on how appetizing it looks.
A rhythmic, light sniff sounding follows Larkin as he leans in to catch the aroma from his spoon.
His eyes fly open in shock. He exclaims that the soup is incredibly delicious and calls her a gifted cook while the girl asks if it truly suits his palate. Larkin enthusiastically agrees, wondering how she achieved such flavor with limited ingredients and claiming the taste makes his worries vanish.
Yoo-jung is quietly relieved to see her new employer enjoying the meal so much after her initial worries.
Larkin continues to eat with genuine joy, repeatedly praising the quality of the food.
A sudden sharp clatter sounding follows the empty bowl as the girl realizes he has already polished off 3 servings.
She watches him with a look of nervous concern, worried that his appetite might deplete her entire morning supply.
A quick, sharp creak sounding follows a noise from the stairs, catching the girl's attention.
A man with short ginger hair and scars appears on the stairs as Larkin greets him and asks if he slept well.
The man sarcastically rejects his greeting.
Larkin encourages him to try a bowl of the wonderful soup, but the traveler flatly refuses the offer.
The man points out that everyone knows Larkin's cooking is terrible, forcing the owner to insist that he didn't make this dish. Larkin pleads his case, explaining that he has hired a talented new chef and seriously didn't cook the soup himself this time.
He offers the meal for free if it doesn't taste good, while Yoo-jung watches the tense exchange, wondering if a fight is about to start.
A heavy, rhythmic stomp sounding follows the grumbling man as he finally gives in and complains about his aching stomach.
Winker warns her that he will vomit on the spot if the food is bad, while Kim Yoo-jung privately notes the heavy smell of alcohol on his breath.
A rhythmic, light sniff sounding follows the scarred man as he leans over the bowl with a look of intense curiosity.
He stirs the colorful soup and admits that the aroma is surprisingly pleasant.
A rhythmic, light top sounding follows Winker as he lifts a wooden spoon to his mouth to finally taste the dish.
He takes a large, careful bite of the hop soup.
The ginger-haired man stares down at his bowl in a stunned, silent pause as the girl waits with bated breath for his verdict. The scene briefly shifts away from the kitchen as a recruitment banner fills the view.
Winker continues to stare at the half-eaten bowl, seemingly lost in thought over the unexpected flavor. Ken Yu-jung becomes increasingly nervous and wonders if the recipe actually failed to suit his palate.
She observes him eating at a frantic pace and realizes he actually seems to be enjoying the meal quite a bit. The man holds out his empty bowl with a look of shimmering demand, much to the girl's relief and surprise.
Winker bluntly admits the soup is excellent while Larkin laughs, boasting that he knew the new chef was talented.
Ken Yu-jung notes with a sweat drop that he managed to finish 3 whole bowls in record time.
He lets out a loud burp and asks for something more substantial, complaining that liquid meals are far too temporary.
The girl is taken aback by his crude way of speaking as she offers a forced, polite smile.
She informs her employer that she is currently out of the necessary ingredients to make a more filling dish.
She explains that she used all the fish and needs to go shopping, prompting Larkin to offer her 50 geld for supplies.
Kang Yu-jung admits she cannot read local numbers, leading Winker to offer to accompany her to the market.
Larkin is thrilled by the suggestion, but the white-haired girl is internally screaming in terror at the thought of being alone with the scary man.
Winker prepares to leave while Larkin cheerfully stays behind to handle the dirty dishes.
A sudden, sharp creak sounding follows the duo as they head out the front door of the inn.
They step onto the street just as a group of travelers arrives, and Larkin welcomes the new guests inside.
Kang Yu-jung is fascinated by the passing travelers, noting that their gear looks exactly like something from a fantasy movie.
She asks about the strangers, and the ginger-haired man explains that they are simply foolish adventurers.
He insults the intelligence of the travelers while the girl hopes they didn't hear his rude assessment. She turns the conversation toward him and asks what he does for a living.
He looks back at her and reveals that his profession is that of a mercenary.
Winker explains that he will take on any guard or escort job as long as the pay involves a sword and a fair price.
He makes a dark, terrifying joke about assassinating anyone she wants gone, sending the girl into a panicked state of denial. He laughs off her reaction and calls her too serious, while she decides he is an incredibly difficult person to deal with.
They walk through the city streets together as the girl reflects on her initial impressions of the town. She feels a surge of excitement about finally visiting the market and discovering new ingredients. Winker asks what she plans to cook next, and she asks if he has any requests, to which he indifferently tells her that anything will do.
He claims that anything she makes is bound to be tasty, and she is stunned by how much trust he has gained in her after just one meal. He suggests they start looking around, and she begins to think that despite his rough exterior, he might actually be a kind person.
Winker takes over the heavy lifting by carrying a large ceramic jar as they navigate the busy market stalls. She observes that beans, onions, and various fish are among the most affordable and common ingredients available.
She is shocked to discover that garlic, ginger, and chili peppers are being sold as pest repellents rather than food.
A heavy rhythmic stomp sounding follows the crowd as the girl realizes that even edible crown daisies are being treated as useless weeds and stepped on.
She notes that bread, fruit, and meat are luxury items, likely because animal husbandry is not very advanced in this region.
The fish market is overflowing with fresh catches, but Winker explains that processing methods are poor, limiting the number of buyers.
Kang Yu-jung watches the mercenary from the side, reconsidering her earlier fears.
She realizes that Winker is actually quite helpful and detailed in his explanations, even going so far as to carry all the heavy supplies.
Despite the fresh ingredients, she finds herself deeply craving the familiar flavors of Korean bulgogi and braised meat. She laments that she lacks soy sauce or soybean paste, and brewing her own would take far too long to be practical. Her attention is suddenly caught by a specific display, and her eyes widen in realization. She asks about a large pile of eggs, and Winker explains that they are dirt-cheap king duck eggs.
He looks at her with suspicion, asking if she is from another world because her questions about basic items are so strange.
He explains that the ducks are used for riding and racing and produce eggs every day, making them a staple for the poor. Kang Yu-jung is horrified to learn that the locals only ever eat the eggs boiled, realizing how much room there is for culinary improvement. She exclaims about the variety of egg recipes.
She recalls Alter's boasts about being a great cook and wonders if he was actually telling the truth.
Kang Yu-jung is shocked at the thought of people living on such poor quality food despite the abundant ingredients.
A delicious scent catches her mouse.
She spots a nearby food vendor.
Skewers and bread look quite appetizing. She offers to buy Winker a snack since she has leftover money, but he flatly refuses.
She insists on buying it because he is carrying all her groceries and runs off despite his protest, smiling with the purchased street food. Winker refuses to spoil his appetite for her cooking and questions why he would eat that when she's about to make something delicious.
She takes a bite of the skewer herself and feels touched by how much he trusts her skills.
Her expression shifts to pure horror. She is revolted by the skewer and wonders what it is even supposed to taste like, hoping the bread will be better.
A sudden, sharp spit sounding follows the girl as she exclaims that the meat is tough and the bread is like a sponge.
Winker laughs at her reaction, noting that her expression says everything while she admits she had no idea it was this bad.
She asks if all the food here tastes like this, while some mice hope they throw the scraps away.
Even the street mice spit out the food and look completely miserable.
A rhythmic, light chime sounding follows them as they return to find Gent waiting for their arrival.
She is surprised by Gent's arrival. The dark-haired man adjusts his mogul.
A rhythmic, light top sounding follows Gent as he explains he has something to deliver to her.
He hands her a bag of money that Visby asked him to deliver from selling her belongings.
A sudden, bright shimmer sounding follows the bag as she is touched that the captain actually kept her promise.
He asks what he should do with the item that looks like rotten fish.
She realizes her precious salted seafood survived because he thought it might be important.
Recalling her hard work on the island, she begs him to bring it to the inn immediately and rejects his offer to dispose of it as trash. A sudden, bright shimmer sounding follows the girl as she rejoices over recovering her seasoning ingredient.
She plans to make kimchi and use the salted fish as an umami-rich sauce.
She stops Gent from leaving for street food and insists she cannot let him go without eating a real meal, promising a truly delicious meal instead. Gent agrees to wait for her, gathering ingredients for the next meal, planning a shrimp and egg feast, washing the fresh seafood and produce, boiling clams for a rich broth.
A quick, sharp crack sounding follows her as she begins cracking the king duck eggs.
She decides to prepare a large portion since Winker's there to eat as well,
Combining broth and shrimp for steaming.
Stirring the egg mixture with chopsticks.
Garnishing the finished steamed egg dish.
moving on to the seafood stir-fry. A sudden, loud sizzle sounding follows the shrimp as she quickly fries them in lard. Winker and Gent wait at the table as the wonderful aroma fills the room.
She feels confident that the flavor has improved even more since her time on the ship.
Gent sits before his steaming bowl. The colorful, appetizing meal is served.
Gent begins to sample the food.
His silence causes her extreme worry.
Gent enjoys the taste of the shrimp.
The various textures and spices create a perfect blend. A sudden, sharp top sounding follows the black-haired man as he reflects on the incredible flavor produced from simple ingredients. The white-haired girl nervously asks for his verdict.
Gent pays for his meal and admits that the captain's high recommendation was well-deserved.
She is delighted by the success while Winker demands his own portion.
Winker stands with other adventurers who are waiting to eat.
The scene shifts to the exterior of the bustling inn. A soft rhythmic bubble sounding follows the girl as she notes that daily sales have skyrocketed. New regulars are starting to form as word of the food spreads. Improved finances allow her to stock the kitchen with abundant supplies. She spends her free time developing complex bay sauces. Dried peppers are ground into a fine, flavorful powder. A soft, quick slurp sounding follows her as she admits she is learning to read very slowly.
She feels happy and fulfilled despite her struggle with local literacy.
A sudden rhythmic chime sounding follows the girl as another guest enters. A quick sharp tilt sounding follows Gent as he arrives for lunch with a companion.
Kang Yu-jung stares at the newcomer in confusion.
The short blonde-haired woman stares back at the chef.
The girl realizes she recognizes the woman from the merchant coat.
She bluntly asks the woman if she is Gent's girlfriend.
The trio stands in an awkward, silent pause in the middle of the inn.
Both Gent and the woman are shocked by the sudden assumption. Gent dismisses the question and asks for the menu while Lysa feels offended by his rupas.
The newcomer clarifies her identity and relationship with Gent.
Lysa introduces herself and explains that she is merely a colleague. The white-haired girl warmly welcomes her and acknowledges their past meeting.
She presents the daily specials, leaving the pair curious about the new dishes.
The new menu item features tender boiled pork and spicy vegetables.
Larkin explains the prices and notes that steamed eggs are included to balance the spice.
Gent and Lysa both enthusiastically order every item available.
Lysa asks about the hanging pots, and the girl explains it is a hearty fish soup.
They decide to add the soup to the large order.
The seafood stir-fry becomes the inn's most popular signature dish.
Thorough morning preparation allows for extremely fast cooking times.
Kang Yu-jung skillfully tosses the seafood over a high frying. The delicious aroma pulls in travelers from the street outside.
Fresh shrimp and vegetables sizzle together in the pan. She plates the stir-fry as she prepares to move on to the meat.
The focus shifts to the preparation of the new pork dish.
A soft, rhythmic sniff sounding follows the girl as she enjoys the scent of the simmering meat.
She starts by soaking the raw pork to clean it thoroughly.
The meat is then placed in a pot with various aromatic spices.
Greens and whole vegetables boil alongside the pork to add depth.
She begins prepping the essential kimchi while the meat finishes cooking. Salted napa cabbage is laid out to be seasoned.
She mixes in seafood, chili powder, and syrup to create a rich sauce.
She tastes her creation and is satisfied with the bold flavor. The fully cooked pork is set aside to rest before serving.
She neatly slices the tender meat to be served with the fresh kimchi.
Sliced pork and fresh kimchi are presented beautifully on a large plate.
Kang Yu-jung serves an elaborate feast featuring the pork, shrimp, and rich soup.
The blonde-haired woman stares in awe as the girl hopes the meal suits her palate.
A quick, soft chew sounding follows the woman as she takes her first bite of the new dish.
The guest begins to tremble in shock, leaving the white-haired chef deeply worried that something is wrong.
A soft, quiet gasp sounding follows Lysa as she's overcome with pure culinary bliss.
She angrily accuses Gent of keeping such an incredible place to himself while he calls her noisy. A sudden, sharp clatter sounding follows the woman as she stands up and vows to tell everyone at the guild. She insists such a gem cannot be hidden while the girl watches happily as Gent tries to quiet his companion. Lysa continues to eat with joy, making the chef feel fulfilled by her genuine appreciation. A sudden, bright shimmer sounding follows the girl as she glows with satisfaction. She watches as various adventurers, including the red-haired Winker, enjoy her food. Her mind drifts back to Nemo, remembering how he used to enjoy her cooking with the same happy expression.
A sudden rhythmic chime sounding follows the girl as a customer's request for more soup pulls her from her memories. She realizes that Lisa's promise to spread the word was far from an empty threat as business booms. A bustling crowd gathers outside the inn as its reputation for fine dining grows rapidly.
The girl works tirelessly in the kitchen to keep up with the demands of the packed dining room.
A soft, quick chop sounding follows her as she prepares ingredients until they sell out every single day.
Larkin thanks the white-haired girl for her hard work and surprises her with a well-deserved raise.
She laments that despite her success, her struggle with local literacy hasn't improved at all.
A sudden bright shimmer sounding follows a beautiful new blue fabric.
King Yoo-jung proudly wears a stunning new blue dress, finally able to afford quality clothing of her own.
She joyfully discards her old, tattered garments, celebrating her improved circumstances.
The mercenary notices her new appearance as she walks through the quiet inn.
A sudden, sharp tap sounding follows Winker as he stands ready for travel with a chest and his sword.
She asks for his opinion on her outfit, and he notes he was wondering how long she'd wear ill-fitting clothes.
A soft, quiet giggle sounding follows the girl as she thanks him for the kind compliment.
Winker questions why she is awake so early and notices her luggage.
A sudden, light laugh sounding follows the girl as she teases him about being hungry after eating 7 servings of pork. The red-haired man explains that he isn't hungry, but something important has come up.
A soft, rhythmic stomp sounding follows Winker as he admits he wanted to say his goodbyes first.
He stands fully equipped for a long journey, looking somber as he prepares to depart.
The white-haired girl is stunned by the realization that he is actually moving on.
She asks for confirmation that he is truly leaving the inn. A quick, sharp tilt sounding follows the mercenary as he confirms his departure.
He explains that he has taken an escort job for the group of rookie adventurers leaving today. He notes that they will be heading out almost immediately.
A soft, quiet sigh sounding follows Winker as he admits he'd much rather stay and keep eating her food.
He explains that he needs to keep his skills sharp and earn money to afford more of her cooking in the future.
The girl looks concerned and asks if the mission he took is dangerous. She reflects on the bond they've built and feels a sudden pang of sadness at his departure. She insists he eat one last meal, and he admits he came down early specifically for her soup.
A sudden, sharp top sounding follows the girl as she realizes this truly might be his last chance to eat her food.
She asks him to wait just a moment while she prepares something special for him.
A sudden, loud sizzle sounding follows the girl as she begins frantically slicing and cooking meat.
She quickly stir-fries thinly sliced meat with salt and pepper over a high flame.
A quick, sharp crack sounding follows the bread as she splits and toasts it in the pan. She layers jam, fresh vegetables, and the seasoned meat to create a hearty traveling meal.
A sudden, bright shimmer sounding follows the perfectly finished sandwiches.
King Yoo-jung presents a large bag of sandwiches, determined to send him off well-fed.
Yoo-jung explains she prepared food for Winker and the other adventurers, and the red-haired man thanks her.
Winker expresses confidence in the quality of her food while the white-haired girl looks on with an emotional expression.
She asks him to promise to return to the inn when he visits the city again.
The red-haired man agrees as they stand together in the pie man. Winker remains silent, looking down at the parcel in his hands with a serious gaze.
He sighs and begins to mention a lingering thought while Yoo-jung waits for him to continue.
A soft, quick pat sounding follows the red-haired man as he ruffles her hair and tells her to stay safe. The girl is left speechless and confused by his sudden gesture of affection.
She watches him go, her face flushed with surprise as she wonders about his intent.
The scene shifts to a dark night as a carriage arrives at the inn.
A sudden sharp top sounding follows the carriage door opening as a man arrives.
Yoo-jung's peaceful routine is interrupted by the arrival of a man in a fancy blue coat. The dark-haired man immediately offers to pay her 10 times her current salary.
He invites her to cook at an establishment called Mage's Dream while Larkin watches in shock. Yoo-jung is repulsed by his arrogance and his assumption that she would never refuse him. She glances toward Larkin, who remains silent and visibly shaken by the stranger's presence.
The owner of the inn looks downcast and unable to voice any objection. The visitor assumes she will make the wise choice to accept, but Yoo-jung has already made up her mind. She firmly rejects the offer, explaining that money is not the reason she works at the login.
A soft, quick smirk sounding follows the dark-haired man as he mockingly calls her brave. He leans over the counter and wonders if her resolve will survive until the next day.
The girl trembles as he bids her farewell, leaving her with a sense of impending dread.
The scene transitions to the dark interior of the inn after his departure.
A sudden, sharp clack sounding follows the closing door as Larkin and the girl sit in heavy silence.
She demands to know who the man was and asks for details about Mage's Dream.
Larkin explains it is an elite guest house for mages and nobles run by the local lord. He identifies the visitor as Bengiran Galaman, one of the lord's retainers.
Yoo-jung is annoyed to learn that such an arrogant man is merely an employee rather than the owner.
She tries to convince herself that he has no real power to force her to leave. She naively hopes that her refusal marks the end of the matter.
Larkin warns her that Bengiran is a dangerous man who never fails to get what he wants.
He predicts that the retainer will return the next day with a more forceful method.
The following morning, Yoo-jung looks out from the inn in horror.
She sees that Bengiran has returned, this time accompanied by a squad of armed knights.
She realizes that people in this world rely on power and authority just like they did in her previous life.
She debates with herself whether she should face the threat or go into hiding.
A sudden, sharp top sounding follows a knock at the door, pulling her back to reality.
Baragon stands outside with Larkin, looking down at the innkeeper with a condescending smile.
The white-haired girl watches from above, her expression filled with worry for her friend.
She decides she cannot let Larkin face the intimidation of the Lord's retainer alone.
A soft, quick stomp sounding follows the girl as she rushes down to the courtyard. Larkin is trembling as he holds a formal document while Bangaron watches with amusement. She demands an explanation for the document and the presence of the guards.
Berengarin mocks the inn as a remote, useless place that fails to show results.
He coldly tells her that nobody would care if the login disappeared entirely.
He threatens to replace Larkin with a more capable manager while the man begs for a reconsideration.
The retainer points out that since the Lord granted the inn's license, he can take it away at any time.
He presents the legal ultimatum to the chef with a cruel, triumphant grin.
Seeing no other choice to save the inn, Yujong agrees to work at Mage's Dream.
She looks at Larkin and informs Bangaron that she will go only if certain conditions are met.
The recruitment notice seeks talented individuals for various positions within the guild.
Ken Yujong presents a document to the retainer and requests that the inn's license revocation be withdrawn. Bangaron notes her illiteracy and insists she remained hidden in the kitchen, leading her to realize she is to be a secret cook.
Larkin reaches out to the white-haired girl with a look of deep concern as she prepares to leave.
She looks back at the innkeeper with a gentle smile and reassures him that everything will be okay.
A massive, ancient tree stands as a silent sentinel in the middle of the paved courtyard.
A carriage travels through the city streets as Yujong begins her journey to her new workplace.
Inside the carriage, Baragon begins to list the rules of the estate while the girl remains lost in her own thoughts. He asks if she is paying attention, but she is too preoccupied with her frustration over his forceful methods.
Yujong gasps as she catches her first glimpse of a magnificent, glowing manor reflecting in her eyes.
Berengar notes the beauty of the shimmering structure as they pull up to the entrance. The entire estate is bathed in a brilliant magical light that illuminates every balcony and window.
A sudden, sharp tsk sounding follows the girl as she rolls her eyes at Bangaron's arrogant boasting about his magic stove.
A sudden, rhythmic rumble sounding follows the carriage as it finally comes to a complete stop.
She finds the structure even more impressive upon closer inspection, marveling at its grand scale. She realizes the claims of magical protection surrounding the inn were far from empty talk as it glows softly.
Yujong is left breathless by the sheer elegance and power radiating from the building.
The estate looks truly dreamlike, appearing as if it were pulled straight from the pages of a fantasy novel.
Bangaron leads her toward the doors while she follows hesitantly, still processing the transition.
She steps onto the lush carpet of the golden, glowing hallway, feeling the weight of the luxury.
A sudden, quiet pat sounding follows the girl as the brilliant magical light in the hall instantly extinguishes.
Darkness consumes the once vibrant corridor, leaving the atmosphere heavy and cold.
Both of them are left stunned and confused by the sudden loss of light in the grand hall.
The exterior shimmer vanishes, leaving the once warm manor looking dull and gray in the morning air.
Every trace of the inn's magical warmth disappears in the blink of an eye.
Yujong stands frozen in the shadows, her face filled with surprise at the sudden change.
Berengar barks orders at a nearby guard to investigate the cause of the magical failure immediately.
He admits that such an outage has never happened before, looking increasingly panicked.
Yujong begins to walk away, secretly wondering if her presence is the cause of the anomaly.
A sudden, bright pat sounding follows the girl as the magical lights reignite the moment she steps forward.
Baragon is left scratching his head in confusion as the light returns as quickly as it left.
The white-haired girl observes his bewilderment with a look of mild concern and curiosity.
He turns to look at her with a suspicious gaze, sensing that something is not right.
Bangaron demands an explanation, accusing her of doing something to interfere with the manor's magic.
A man covered in soapsuds storms out and yells at Bangaron about the hot water turning freezing cold.
Bangaron is struck by a sudden realization as he looks at the girl, his expression turning pale.
Yujong stands defiantly with her arms crossed and asks where she should go to start her work.
The dark-haired retainer grits his teeth in silent frustration, unable to find a clear answer.
He informs her that she is free to return home for the day, much to her surprise.
Bangaron is swamped by the Lord's angry complaints as he shouts that he will come for her again.
Frantic shouts for Bangaron echo through the manor as the chaos of the magical failure continues.
Yujong laughs happily as she walks away, joking to herself about how annoyed Larkin will be to see her.
She realizes the carriage has left her behind and shouts for a ride back to the city.
She reflects on the mystery of the vanishing magic, certain that it only happened when she got close.
She wonders if her status as an outsider is the cause, but knows she needs a mage to confirm her theory.
She considers seeking answers from a local mage, despite having heard that they are a selfish and difficult group. Her mind turns to Nemo, a name she had slowly been forgetting amidst her busy life at the inn.
She admits that finding one specific person in such a vast world is a nearly impossible task.
A sudden, loud quack sounding follows a man as he charges toward her on the back of a giant duck.
The rider yells for her to move out of the way as the massive bird surprises the white-haired girl.
The rider speeds away as the girl catches her breath from the startle.
Reaching the main road, she finds it too crowded and decides to take an alley instead. She wanders into a narrow, stone-paved alleyway to avoid the bustle of the city. She stops in her tracks, noticing a strange, dark substance running ahead of her.
She spots a mysterious figure slumped on the ground surrounded by a thick black fog. Startled, she calls out to the person partially obscured by the dark mist. She observes the fog writhing and moving like a swarm of insects clumped together. A sense of dread washes over her as she notes how truly ominous the fog looks. Though afraid to touch it, she worries the person inside might be in grave danger.
She wonders if her presence will affect this magic and decides it's the perfect chance to find out.
Resolving to find proof of her theory, she prepares to step into the unknown. The white-haired girl hesitantly approaches the figure enveloped in the dark, swirling energy.
Steeling her nerves, she yells as she charges blindly into the heart of the black mist.
The scene shifts to a recruitment notice seeking talented individuals for various positions within the guild. As she breaks through, the fog vanishes to reveal a gray-haired man collapsed against the wall.
She stands over the stranger, looking down at his motionless form with wide, shocked eyes. The man remains unconscious, a detailed silver brooch pinned to his travel-worn cloak.
She gasps in surprise, confirming that there really was a living person inside the bizarre fog.
Noticing his disheveled appearance, she wonders if he is a vagrant or the victim of a mage.
Deciding she cannot just leave him, she kneels down to provide whatever aid she can.
She checks for signs of life, carefully observing the man's pale, still features.
She is relieved to find he is still alive, though he remains unresponsive to her touch. The man's hand suddenly snaps up, grabbing her neck as he jolts awake.
He pulls her close, his intense blue eyes boring into her with a terrifying focus.
He stares at her in bewilderment and demands to know what she is.
Panicking as he tries to speak further, the girl screams and knocks him back with a forceful head.
The stranger collapses heavily onto the ground after being pushed back by the girl's frantic reaction.
The two lie on the ground, the man unconscious once more after her reflexive strike.
She looks at her hands in confusion, wondering why her body acted on its own.
She stares down at her victim with a mixture of guilt and annoyance at the situation. She realizes she is now stuck with an unconscious stranger and wonders what to do. Back at the end, Larkin greets her with surprise and asks what happened to her.
She explains the issues at her new job while Larkin frets over her safety and well-being.
She reassures the worried innkeeper that she was not mistreated during her short absence.
Larkin looks curiously at the man she brought home, noticing his worn clothing.
He looks closely at the stranger's face and asks Yuzhong for the man's iconomy.
Larkin teases her by asking if this is her new boyfriend, prompting an angry denial.
Ignoring his jokes, she asks for his help to lay the unconscious man down properly. They move the stranger to a table, noting that while he's dirty, he doesn't seem injured.
The innkeeper asks if the man is someone she brought back from Mage's dream.
She clarifies that she simply found him collapsed in an alleyway on her way back home.
Larkin praises her kindness, while she secretly hopes he never finds out she knocked the man out.
She continues the conversation, but her mind is clearly elsewhere as she glances back.
The atmosphere inside the familiar inn feels heavy as they deal with their unexpected guest.
Larkin admits he has no idea what the fog could have been or where it came from.
He tells her she did a brave thing, unaware of her inner guilt regarding the man's state. She glances back at the stranger, her eyes lingering on his face as she processes the day's events. Looking closer, she admits to herself that the man is actually quite handsome. Larkin mentions that Mr. Gent stopped by earlier, which captures the girl's immediate attention. He recounts Jen's promise to return tonight, and she decides to discuss everything with the mage then. Larkin informs her that he must return to the main hall, and the girl offers to accompany him.
She notes the need to prepare for the upcoming dinner service as they head back in talk.
The white-haired girl excitedly announces her plan to begin cooking for the evening. She pauses in the middle of the empty dining room, looking around in confusion.
Frustrated, the girl demands to know why the inn has no customers.
She questions the innkeeper about the complete lack of patrons in the building.
Larkin explains that rumors of her departure for another workplace have driven everyone away.
A sudden low rumble sounding follows the girl as her hunger distracts her from the depressing news. The innkeeper hears her stomach growl and asks if she has skipped her meal dinner. Larkin looks at her with a gentle, understanding expression. She reflects on how he prioritized her well-being even when the inn's future was at risk. She recalls his genuine love for food and his selflessness during their difficult transition. Moved by his kindness, the white-haired girl feels a surge of determination. She enters the storage cellar, noting the absence of dairy products like butter and cheese in this world. She holds up a block of cheese she secretly prepared and aged in the cool cellar. A glowing array of different cheeses she crafted highlights her culinary expertise and preparation. The girl looks at her creations with a satisfied and hopeful smile. She decides to use her special cheese to cook a unique meal for the innkeeper.
She begins her work by mixing flour and yeast to knead into fresh dough.
She carefully prepares various toppings including seasoned shrimp, meat, potatoes, and tomatoes.
She layers the ingredients on the dough and covers them in mozzarella before placing the dish into the oven.
The golden, steaming dish is revealed as she describes its perfect texture and rich toppings. She explains that this new dish is called pizza and should be eaten by hand.
The white-haired girl presents the meal and encourages the innkeeper to give it a time. Larkin takes a large, enthusiastic bite, enjoying the stretchy cheese and vibrant flavors.
A close-up of the dish shows the fresh tomatoes and herbs used in the recipe. The innkeeper praises the incredible taste and the satisfying texture of the shrimp.
A sudden loud bang sounding follows the door as a voice calls for the girl.
A man wearing a monocle and a brown coat enters the room looking disheveled.
Yu Jong recognizes the newcomer as Mr. Gent and looks at him in surprise.
He notices her and asks if she has just returned from her ordeal at the Grand Manor.
She asks if something has gone wrong, noting the sweat on his brow. Mr. Gent promises to explain later and tries to catch his breath.
Outside, a sudden rhythmic clatter sounding follows a carriage as it pulls up to the inn.
Bangaron enters the inn with a confident smile and asks for the white-haired girl.
He is suddenly struck by a look of shock as he realizes someone else is already there.
Mr. Gent identifies himself as a merchant, explaining why he is familiar with the establishment.
The two men greet each other formally, much to the girl's quiet amazement. Gent confronts the retainer about his unethical business practices and forceful recruitment of the chef.
Yu Jong loudly confirms that she was kidnapped while the innkeeper nods in agreement. A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows the man's step as the merchant looms over him.
Gent warns that such behavior will cause the Merchant Guild to lose trust in the region's leadership.
The dark-haired retainer stammers out a nervous denial, visibly shaken by the threat.
The merchant dismisses him by assuming he only came for a meal, and the retainer quickly agrees. A sudden, quick zoom sounding follows the man as he makes a hasty excuse and flees.
The girl expresses her deep gratitude to Mr. Gent for saving them from further trouble.
He modestly explains that he was simply fulfilling a duty to look after her.
She watches him with a warm smile, appreciating his quiet and reliable support. She invites him to stay for dinner, though he notes it is still quite early.
His attention is caught by the enticing and unfamiliar aroma of the freshly baked pizza. She pushes the merchant toward a chair and promises to serve him more dishes.
She decides to prepare something extra special for him as a token of gratitude.
A sudden, quick beep sounding follows her rejection of complex dishes due to limited time and supplies.
She considers making a new variety of soup as potato and seafood are already on the menu. The white-haired girl begins dicing potatoes and onions to prepare her new culinary creation.
The rich and flavorful potage soup is finally completed.
A steaming bowl of soup is presented, topped with golden croutons and corn.
Gent is impressed by the generous meal while the innkeeper looks on with a smile.
She observes the merchant and reflects on his panicked arrival earlier that day.
She recalls his frantic expression during their first meeting of the day. She remembers the distress on the innkeeper's face when he sought help.
The white-haired girl beams with joy at her companions.
The scene shifts to the quiet and empty common room of the inn.
Mr. Gent reacts with surprise at being considered an important figure in the district.
She reminds him of his influence over the retainer, but he attributes it to economic concerns. He explains that merchants are on edge due to current rumors and local instability. The conversation turns to the dangers posed by the nearby land of Calamity. Ships docked at a bustling harbor represent the recently established merchant guild in the area. Residents look worried as dark rumors about the proximity to the cursed land continue to spread.
The merchant notes that the growing unease is prompting many traders to consider relocating.
A set of ornate scales tips toward gold coins as blood drips from the empty pan.
He warns that further disruption from leadership could cause the entire trade district to fail. The white-haired girl listens with a serious expression, absorbing the gravity of his explanation. A sudden, sharp cut sounding follows Gent's firm refusal to share the specific nature of the rumors.
She is alarmed to learn that the retainer intends to return to the establishment.
Gent reassures her that the man is likely returning solely for her renowned cooking.
She reviews her new employment contract, stunned by the massive salary and flexible conditions.
Her eyes widen as she discovers a particularly beneficial clause within the document.
She is overjoyed to realize she can finally afford to use high-quality, expensive ingredients.
Imagining a future filled with elaborate desserts, she celebrates her new opportunities.
She happily clutches the paper while the merchant watches her reaction with amusement. She invites Gent to join them for breakfast as she returns to her kitchen duties.
The scene shifts to a quiet bedroom where the gray-haired stranger lies unconscious.
The man slowly awakens, his intense blue eyes blinking open in the dimly lit room.
She apologizes for the simple meal, explaining that she hasn't restocked her supplies yet. She carries a wooden plate laden with fresh shrimp and sliced tomatoes to the table.
A sudden, rhythmic, slow stomp sounding follows a set of footsteps approaching the dining area.
The white-haired girl turns in surprise at the sound of someone entering a room.
The gray-haired stranger walks slowly into the hall, his travel-worn cloak flowing.
He stands silently before the group, his expression cold and unreadable.
The innkeeper notes the man's refusal to write or speak, suggesting he might be illiterate.
She finds the stranger's sudden silence peculiar given their previous interaction. She vividly remembers the man clearly demanding answers when he first accosted her. Gent asks about the stranger's identity, noting how unusually she is treating him. The merchant looks at the new arrival with blatant skepticism and disapproval.
She offers a vague and nervous explanation as the man remains motionlessly behind her.
The gray-haired man's blue eyes narrow, casting a chilling and focused stare.
Gent questions her decision to house a random vagrant she found on the street.
She inquires about the nature of the strange black mist she saw around the man.
Gent warns that such a dark and ominous energy is likely the result of a curse.
Gent remarks that neither the girl nor the innkeeper have the heart to evict anyone.
The black-haired merchant gazes at the stranger with lingering and blatant suspicion.
Yu Jung notices the stranger's anxious gaze and questions Gent's unnecessarily intense glare.
Gent concludes that the man likely isn't a criminal since his face isn't on any wanted posters.
He questions the wisdom of housing someone potentially cursed, but she refuses to abandon him.
The gray-haired stranger suddenly reaches out and takes the girl's hand in his.
A close-up shows the man's gloved hand firmly but gently grasping her wrist.
The stranger begins to curiously examine her fingers, leaving her confused and flustered. The white-haired girl is taken aback by the man's unexpected and forward behavior. The stranger gazes at her intently and asks if she truly has no memory of him. He offers a soft, blushing smile as blue roses bloom in the background.
She explains the situation to Larkin, who agrees the man might have lost his memory.
Gent's face darkens as he watches the interaction with clear annoyance and jealousy.
The merchant turns on his heel and begins to walk away in frustration.
Gent decides to personally investigate the mysterious man's identity to ensure their safety.
He warns her to watch him closely and even suggests restraining him if necessary. The girl apologizes for the trouble, but she and the innkeeper decide to care for the man.
Larkin reassures her, noting they needed more help for their new contract with the mage anyway.
The innkeeper suggests that the amnesiac stranger could handle simple errands in the kitchen.
She asks the man if he is willing to help with the work in exchange for their hospitality.
The gray-haired stranger stands close to her, his presence bathed in a warm and glowing light. The scene shifts to a quiet stone window overlooking the starry night sky.
The traveler lies asleep in a simple bed within the dim, stone-walled room.
The white-haired girl wakes up and groggily rubs her eyes in the morning light.
She suddenly freezes as she notices something unexpected in her bag. She realizes the gray-haired man has snuck into her bed to sleep again.
She tries to wake him, though she secretly finds his body heat comforting on cold dawns.
She reflects on how he ended up sharing her room to avoid the rat-infested storage cellar. She watches him sleep and admits to herself that his handsome face is quite distracting.
The contract with the Mage's Dream Inn is finalized as a carriage arrives at Tag.
Their primary task involves delivering a massive pot of soup 3 times every day.
Standing behind a giant iron pot, the girl notes that their daily workload has tripled.
She enthusiastically encourages her new assistant to prepare for another long, busy day.
The gray-haired man, now officially part of the staff, nods in silent agreement. Larkin gives the man the name Id, taken from his own younger brother's name.
The girl is impressed by how incredibly skilled Id is when using kitchen knives.
She recalls a guest's comment that Ide handles a knife like a trained swordsman.
Despite his skills, she finds it strange that his physical stamina is surprisingly weak.
A long queue of hungry patrons forms outside the entrance of the busy inn.
Gent returns to the establishment and notes that she is still keeping the stranger around.
Lysa teases Gent about being jealous while the girl welcomes them back to the inn.
The girl defends the new hire, insisting that Ide has been an immense help lately. Jen points out that the man follows her around like a loyal, trailing puppy.
The white-haired girl turns in surprise to find Ide standing right behind her.
Ide gazes down at her with a calm, devoted, and unwavering stare. The man offers a radiant, sparkling smile that fills the room with warmth. The white-haired girl blushes intensely, captivated by her handsome new assistant's tar.